Chapter 1394. Gone. Yi Xian stood in the starry sky, looking as if he had lost his soul. At this time, Guan Yin appeared beside Yi Xian, her expression extremely ugly. Yi Xian asked, "What happened?" Guan Yin shook her head, "I don't know." At this time an old man suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian and Guan Yin. The old man bowed to them, "Greetings, Alliance Leader Yi. Miss Guan." Yi Xian looked at the old man. "What happened?" The old man shook his head, "I don't know either. Miss Nian's body was still there, but just now her body disappeared." Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Sister Nian's body was taken away? Who? Doubting? Thinking of this, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. At this time Yi Jiming suddenly said, "It can't be Doubting." Yi Xian asked, "Why?" Yi Jiming said solemnly, "You need to calm down." Yi Xian fell silent, clenching his fists. Yi Jiming continued, "Doubting bringing Mu Nian's body is meaningless. Are they going to use her body to threaten you? That's obviously impossible. Moreover, with your current strength, if someone stepped into the fifth dimension, you would definitely be able to detect it, right?" Yi Xian slowly clenched his right fist. Yi Jiming was right. With his current strength, if someone stepped into the fifth dimension, he would be able to detect it immediately. But just now he did not sense any aura. Who was it? Yi Xian swept his gaze across the starry sky, his eyes as cold as ice. At this time Source Spirit suddenly appeared. She looked at the empty starry sky in the distance, stunned, then looked at Yi Xian. "It's gone." Yi Xian nodded. Source Spirit asked, "Doubting?" Yi Xian shook his head, "Doesn't seem like it." Saying this, he slowly closed his eyes. Doubting? The Dao Tomb? But it didn't look like it. There was no reason for the Dao Tomb. Although there was a reason for Doubting, what was Doubting doing with Sister Nian's body? Was he going to use it to threaten him? That was possible. With that thought in mind, Yi Xian opened his eyes, and in the next moment he vanished on the spot. Guan Yin's expression changed when she saw this. She wanted to stop Yi Xian, but Yi Xian had disappeared without a trace. In the abyss of the heaven realm, in front of the main hall of the divine palace, a sword light suddenly appeared. Almost at the same time, a spear pierced through the air from within the palace. Boom! In the sky above the divine palace, a sword light exploded, and a man appeared above the divine palace. The person who had arrived was precisely Yi Xian. When Yi Xian appeared, Bai Dizzy, True Martial God, and White Robe appeared as well. Bai Dizzy stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "What are you trying to do?" Yi Xian looked at Bai Dizzy. "Did you do it?" Bai Dizzy frowned slightly. "What do you mean we did it?" Yi Xian said fiercely, "Sister Nian's body is no longer here. Did you Doubting do it?" Mu Nian's body. Bai Dizzy was stunned, and then he said, "The fifth dimension Tendo's body is gone?" Yi Xian stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "Did you Doubting?" Bai Dizzy was about to speak when True Martial God suddenly said, "Yi Xian, I did not Doubting do it." Yi Xian looked at True Martial God, and True Martial God said solemnly, "Doubting and you are mortal enemies, but not to this extent. Also Mu Nian is the strongest. Although the omnipotent expert has already fallen, we still respect her very much. We would never do such a shameless thing." Yi Xian's expression became fiercer. "If it wasn't you, who else could it be?" True Martial God looked at Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, why do we want Mu Nian's body? Are we going to use it to threaten you? So we can use it to threaten you now. Also, Doubting is not as despicable as you think. Even if we wanted to kill you, we would not use such despicable means." As he spoke, he glanced at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy immediately said angrily, "Why are you looking at me? I have never done such a thing and I disdain to do it." True Martial God nodded. "Very well. Yi Zhenwu would never do something like stealing someone's corpse." In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Not Doubting. Could it be the Dao Tomb? At this moment, Qing Yaoyao suddenly appeared next to Yi Xian and looked at Yi Xian. "It is not the Dao Tomb, I am sure of this." "Not the Dao Tomb." Yi Xian was silent, his expression becoming more and more fierce. Who could it be? After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly turned and left. In the field, Qing Yaoyao frowned. Mu Nian's body was gone. Who would steal Mu Nian's body? Why would they steal it? Qing Yaoyao turned to look at Bai Dizzy and the others. "It really wasn't you?" True Martial God said solemnly, "Heavenly Monarch, I Doubting am not that despicable. Besides, I, true martial, respect an expert like Mu Nianyan from the bottom of my heart. Why would I do such a despicable thing? Qin Yaoyao turned to look at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy was expressionless. What, am I that despicable? Qin Yaoyao said indifferently, true martial god is an expert and he has his pride, but you, Bai Dizzy, don't have that. What immoral things can't you do? Bai Dizzy said coldly, think whatever you want. Qi Yaoyao said nothing else and turned to leave. In the field, true martial god said solemnly, who would steal Mu Nianyan's body? Bai Dizzy said, doubting is the most suspicious, followed by the Dao tomb. True martial god looked at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy said, although she is dead, her body is also a 5-dimensional tendo and she is so strong. Her body must be useful. At this point he said angrily, why are you looking at me like that? I said it. I didn't do it. At this time White Robe suddenly said, if it wasn't us and not the Dao tomb, then who could it be? The three fell into silence. After a long time Bai Dizzy seemed to think of something and his pupils suddenly shrank. Could it be? White Robe and True Martial God looked at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy's face was pale and he was a little frightened. True Martial frowned. Could it be what? Bai Dizzy said with a trembling voice. It is possible. It is completely possible. At this point he looked at True Martial and White Robe. Wait for my news. After saying this he turned around and disappeared. True Martial and White Robe were dumbfounded. Heavenly King Palace. At this time Luo Ho and the others were there. They already knew that Mu Nianyan's body in the 5-dimensional universe had disappeared. Inside the palace, Luo Ho looked at Qian Yaoyao. Do you think this was done by doubting? Qian Yaoyao shook her head. It doesn't seem like it. Like what True Martial said, they are not that despicable. Especially True Martial and White Robe, no matter what, they would not do anything to Mu Nianyan's body. That kind of powerhouse is respected by everyone. Luo Ho nodded. Even he respected Mu Nianyan from the bottom of his heart. Powerhouses still had their pride, especially people like True Martial and White Robe. Therefore he did not believe that White Robe and True Martial had done anything to Mu Nianyan's body. At this time Bitter King suddenly said, if it is not us and not doubting, then who could it be? Or does this Zhou Xian have other enemies? In the palace Qian Yaoyao was silent. No one spoke either. The palace sank into silence. After an unknown amount of time, Qian Yaoyao's pupils suddenly shrank. Could it be? In the palace, everyone looked at Qian Yaoyao. Qi Yaoyao did not speak. She stood up and left. After leaving the palace, she disappeared without a trace. No one knew where she went. In the palace, the three looked at each other. In the starry sky, Zhou Xian just stood there, staring at the place where Mu Nianyan's body had been. Disappeared without a trace. It was not the Dao tomb, nor was it doubting. Then who could it be? Zhou Xian's eyes were somewhat blank. Who took Sister Nian's body away? Yiling? She had the ability to take Sister Nian's body away without a trace, but she would not do so. Then who else could it be? Could it be that dark abyss? But that was not possible either. He could not think of anyone else. Just like that, Zhou Xian stood in the starry sky for a whole day and a night. On this day Zhou Xian had unknowingly arrived in Shaman City. He just walked on the streets looking as if he had lost his soul. Shaman City was bustling. There were stalls on both sides of the streets and the sounds of people shouting could be heard. At that moment an angry voice suddenly came from Zhou Xian's right. You thief, how dare you steal? Zhou Xian looked in the direction of the sound. Not far away, a fat man was whipping a beggar crazily with a wooden stick. The beggar was curled up on the ground, hugging something tightly. He did not make a sound even though he was being whipped by the fat man. The beggar's hair was long, messy, and dirty. His face could not be seen. The fat man stepped on the beggar and scolded, how dare you steal from me? Tui. As he spoke he continued whipping the beggar with the wooden stick. At that moment Zhou Xian suddenly appeared before the fat man. When he saw Zhou Xian, a hint of wariness appeared in the fat man's eyes, because Zhou Xian's attire told him that he was not a normal person, and he even had a sword with him. Zhou Xian crouched down before the beggar and gently pushed aside the beggar's messy hair. When he saw the beggar's face he was instantly stunned. It was a little girl. But her face was very dirty and there were even wounds on it. The little girl was terrified. She hugged the thing in her hands tightly and her body trembled. Hit me. It hurts, Zhou Xian asked softly. What's your name? The little girl cast a glance at Yi Xian and lowered her head slightly. Her lips moved but she did not say anything. Yi Xian said gently, "Don't be afraid, I won't hit you." The little girl lifted her head slightly. She cast a glance at Yi Xian, but soon lowered her head and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, "Nian. My name is Nian Nian." Hearing this, Yi Xian instantly felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He was petrified on the spot. In the little girl's arms was a fish that was still jumping. The little girl hugged the fish tightly and she was terrified. Chapter 1395. Yan Yan. Yi Xian looked at the little girl in front of him as if he had lost his soul. Sister Nian? This thought flashed through Yi Xian's mind. However, the little girl in front of him looked completely different from Sister Nian. However, he felt that this little girl looked familiar. This was also the reason why he had stopped in his tracks. At this moment, the fat man suddenly said, "Who are you?" As he spoke, he constantly tapped his palm with the wooden stick as if he was threatening her. Yi Xian was about to speak when the little girl suddenly hugged her knees and buried her head in them. She said with a trembling voice, "Don't hit me. It hurts." A ruthless glint flashed through the fat man's eyes. He was about to grab the little girl's hair when a sword suddenly pierced through his forehead. His blood splattered. The expressions of the people on the street changed drastically as they retreated. Yi Xian ignored everyone. He squatted in front of the little girl and said gently, "Don't worry, no one will hit you." The little girl seemed to be very afraid. She curled up into a ball but she kept hugging her fish. Even when she was being beaten up badly, she didn't let go of the fish. Yi Xian felt his heart ache for some reason when he saw that the little girl was still very afraid. As if he had thought of something, he pressed his palm gently against the ground. In an instant, a ball of fire appeared on the ground. Yi Xian gently crooked his index finger, and a fish flew into his hand from a bucket in the distance. He cleaned the fish quickly and then started to grill it. Soon, the fragrance of fish wafted through the air. At this moment, the little girl raised her head slightly. When she saw the roasted fish in Yi Xian's hand, she blinked, but she quickly buried her head in her lap. Clearly she was still very afraid. Yi Xian hurriedly took out some seasonings and placed them on the roasted fish. Soon the roasted fish became even more fragrant. The little girl would steal a glance at the roasted fish from time to time. Yi Xian handed the roasted fish to Nian Nian and said gently, "Here, this is for you." The little girl raised her head and looked at Yi Xian. Her throat rolled but she did not dare to take it. Yi Xian smiled and said gently, "Don't be afraid. With me around, no one will dare to hit you." After hesitating for a while, the little girl slowly reached for the grilled fish. Yi Xian tried his best to make his smile amiable. He had never been so cautious before. The little girl held on to the grilled fish and Yi Xian immediately let go. The little girl's throat rolled and she was about to eat when Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Be careful, it's hot." As he spoke, he quickly blew on the grilled fish. The little girl glanced at Yi Xian and took a bite. When the fish entered her mouth, she blinked and quickly took a few more bites. At the side, Yi Xian squatted down and looked at the little girl in front of her. "Is that Sister Nian?" Yi Xian didn't know, but he hoped so. Soon the little girl finished the grilled fish. Yi Xian blinked. "Do you want more?" The little girl nodded. Yi Xian hurriedly continued grilling. Soon he handed the grilled fish to the little girl. "Here." The little girl glanced at Yi Xian. There was no longer any fear in her eyes. The little girl took the grilled fish and seemed to have thought of something. She tore off a piece of fish and handed it to Yi Xian. Her hands were very, very dirty. Yi Xian's heart ached when he saw this. He took the piece of fish and put it in his mouth. After eating it, he blinked and smiled. "I want more." The little girl looked at Yi Xian. Xian blinked and then she tore off another piece of fish and gave it to Yi Xian. After Yi Xian finished eating, he looked at the grilled fish in the little girl's hand. The little girl hesitated for a moment, then tore off another piece of fish and gave it to Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian didn't take it. He pointed at the fish in the little girl's arms. At this moment, the fish was already dead. The little girl understood what Yi Xian meant. She hesitated for a while and then handed the fish to Yi Xian. After Yi Xian cleaned the fish, he started grilling it. Soon Yi Xian finished grilling the fish and shared it with the little girl. At this moment, the little girl was no longer wary of him. After eating the fish, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and extended his hand to the little girl. He smiled and said, "Let's go home." Home. The little girl was stunned. Then she lowered her head slightly. Xian smiled and said, "I'll grill fish for you for the rest of your life." The little girl looked up at Xian. She just looked at Xian with a confused look in her eyes. Xian looked at the little girl with a smile. His hand was still extended in the same way. A moment later, the little girl suddenly extended her hand and placed it in Xian's. Xian smiled and said, "Let's go." Just as the little girl was about to stand up, she seemed to have affected her wounds. She immediately gasped and looked at Xian with tears in her eyes. "It hurts." Looking at the little girl who was covered in injuries, Xian felt like a knife was being twisted in his heart. He hurriedly squatted down and took out a pill for the little girl. "Here, take it." The little girl didn't refuse. She opened her mouth and swallowed the pill. Very quickly, the pill transformed into a pure energy that spread throughout her body. In a short while, all the injuries on her body had basically recovered. The little girl moved her hands. Then she lifted her head to look at Xian. The shocked look on her face was very cute. Xian smiled and said, "It's amazing, right?" The little girl nodded vigorously. Xian laughed and pulled the little girl's hand. "Let's go home." The little girl nodded. She held onto Xian's hand tightly as if she was afraid that Xian would run away. Xian pulled the little girl and slowly walked into the distance. At this moment, Yiming's voice suddenly sounded in Xian's mind. "She is." Xian said softly in his heart, "I know." Yiming said solemnly, "Now I understand something." Xian asked, "What is it?" Yiming said, "She was born because of the fifth dimension and then died because of the fifth dimension. If I'm not wrong, she was able to be reborn because you cured the fifth dimension." The fifth dimension. The current fifth dimension was unprecedentedly good. Not only were there more than 160 dragon veins, there were also more than 10,000 heaven and earth spirits. Other than that, under Xian's management, there were no more wars in the fifth dimension. No super experts dared to fight in the fifth dimension. Moreover, Xian also brought back some top grade or veins. These top grade or veins could also nourish the heaven and earth. Under such circumstances, not only had the fifth dimension's tribulation completely disappeared, the origin of the fifth dimension, which was the origin spirit, had also been restored. At this moment, Yiming said again, "The origin of the fifth dimension has been restored and the fifth dimension's tribulation has also disappeared. In other words, there is no need for her to suppress it. It was this universe that allowed her to be reborn. However, what I don't understand is why she lost her memories and doesn't have any power." Xian looked at the little girl beside him. He was also very curious. He could now confirm that this little girl was Sister Nian. However, why did Sister Nian lose her memories? Not only that, she also completely lost her power. Could it be because of her previous injuries? At this moment, Xian suddenly stopped. Not far away from him stood an old man. Bai Emperor's son. Bai Dizzy just stared at the little girl beside Xian. The little girl was somewhat afraid and hurriedly hid behind Xian. Bai Dizzy gave Xian a deep look before turning to leave. Xian was silent. He knew that Bai Dizzy already knew that the little girl behind him was Sister Nian. At this moment, Qing Yaoyao suddenly appeared not far away from Xian. She looked at the little girl who only had her head poked out from behind Xian in silence. Xian looked at Qing Yaoyao, not saying anything. After a moment, Qing Yaoyao softly said, "Have you thought about the consequences?" Xian smiled. "What consequences?" Qing Yaoyao looked at Xian. "They won't let her recover her memories and strength. They will do it at all costs." Xian smiled. "Then what about the Dao tomb?" Qing Yaoyao shook her head. "I don't know. Her appearance will make everyone wary of you." With that, she glanced at the little girl behind Xian. "Take care." With that, she sighed softly and turned to leave. She didn't expect this fifth dimension Tendo to still be alive. Oh, it should be rebirth. This rebirth was definitely not a good thing for Xian. This was because Mu Nianyan had not only lost her memories but also her strength. Would doubting help Mu Nianyan recover her memories? Would doubting help Mu Nianyan recover her strength? No. Doubting would kill this little girl at all costs. At all costs. On the field, Xian was silent. He naturally understood what Qin Yaoyao meant. He originally needed time to develop, but now he didn't have any. At this moment, the little girl suddenly tugged at Xian's hand. Xian smiled. He looked at the little girl. "Don't worry. With me here, no one can hurt you." "No one." With that he squatted down and smiled. Come, I'll carry you home. The little girl blinked, then shook her head. Dirty. Yi Xian smiled. Nian Nian isn't dirty at all. With that he bent his body. The little girl hesitated, then climbed onto Yi Xian's back. Yi Xian carried the little girl and walked away slowly. On the way, Yi Xian suddenly asked, Nian Nian, do you remember what happened in the past? The little girl shook her head. I don't remember. Yi Xian asked. Not at all. The little girl was silent. Yi Xian asked, just a little? The little girl pressed her head against Yi Xian's back and said softly, I think I had a dream. That dream was very long, but I don't remember many things in the dream. But, Yi Xian hurriedly asked, but what? The little girl glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, I think you were in that dream. Yi Xian was stunned. Then he smiled. Really? The little girl nodded. Really? Yi Xian said with a smile, am I good or bad in your dream? The little girl thought about it and said, in the dream, you were always causing trouble. I don't remember anything else. Yi Xian slowly walked away with the little girl on his back. He didn't know when, but his cheeks were covered in tears. P.S. I also had a dream. In the dream I was first in the monthly votes. There were so many monthly votes. There were people fighting to vote for me every day. Chapter 1396. Yi Xian brought the little girl back to the sword hall where he lived. Guan Yin was also in the hall. Yi Xian brought the little girl to Guan Yin. He looked at Guan Yin and said, take her to clean up. Guan Yin nodded slightly. All right. With that she stretched out her hand to the little girl. However, the little girl hid behind Yi Xian. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian squatted down and grabbed the little girl's hands. He smiled and said, it's all right. Big sister is also a good person. She won't hurt you. The little girl glanced at Guan Yin and lowered her head slightly. Yi Xian gently rubbed the little girl's head and said softly, don't be afraid. Tell me who bullied you. I'll beat him to death. The little girl raised her head and looked at Yi Xian. She said softly, don't go, Yi Xian smiled. I won't go. Go take a bath with big sister and change into a nice set of clothes, okay? The little girl looked at her clothes. She hesitated for a long time before nodding. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. Guan Yin held the little girl's hand and walked towards the inner hall. Inside the hall, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and slowly closed his eyes. Yi Jiming suddenly said, what do you think Daoting will do next? Yi Xian didn't say anything. What will Daoting do? A moment later, Yi Xian left the sword hall and came to the fish stall where he first met Nian Nian. At this moment there was no one here. Yi Xian walked to the fish stall. There was a corpse in front of the fish stall. It was the corpse of the fishmonger. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian opened his palm and the soul-suppressing sword appeared in his hand. The next moment, the soul-suppressing sword trembled slightly and a shadow floated out. It was the soul of the fishmonger who had whipped Nian Nian. He had used the soul-suppressing sword to kill the fishmonger. Although the soul-suppressing sword had absorbed the fishmonger's soul, it hadn't completely digested it. Thus his soul was still there. Seeing Yi Xian, the fishmonger hurriedly kowtowed and said with a trembling voice, spare me, spare me. Yi Xian looked at the fishmonger. It was Nian Nian's fault for stealing your fish. It was my fault for killing you. As he spoke, he opened his palm and then pressed it lightly towards fishmonger. Very soon, a mysterious force enveloped fishmonger, and gradually fishmonger's soul entered his body. Not long after, fishmonger slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the sky with slight confusion, and he found it hard to believe that he was still alive. As if he had thought of something, the fishmonger hurriedly got up. He knelt before Yi Xian and kowtowed as if pounding garlic. Thank you, Immortal, for not killing me. Thank you, Immortal, for not killing me. Yi Xian opened his palm. A black scroll and a bottle of pills landed in front of the fishmonger. This is a cultivation technique. If you cultivate this technique, it shouldn't be difficult for you to live for 100 years. Sister Nian ate one of your fish and I gave you a fortune. Or even. As he spoke, he turned and left. Behind him, the fishmonger was still kowtowing crazily. However, at this moment he wasn't afraid but excited and agitated. After Yi Xian left the city gate, he suddenly said, come. As his voice fell, a shadow appeared beside him and bowed respectfully. Yi Xian said softly, secretly observe him. If he's evil, kill him. If he's good, help him. The shadow bowed respectfully. Yes. As he spoke, he quietly disappeared. Yixian slowly closed his eyes. Sister Nian, we don't owe anyone anything, even if it's a fish. After he finished speaking, he also disappeared. Heaven Realm Abyss, Heavenly Palace. Inside the palace, Bai Dizzy sat on a chair and did not speak for a long time. He had been sitting for a full 2 hours. During this time he did not say a word. Next to him, True Martial Divine Lord and White Robe's expressions were extremely grave. They did not expect that Moon Yanyan had been reborn. That woman was not Yi Xian. Yi Xian's threat was in the future, but that woman's threat was now. Now that the fifth dimension had recovered its vitality, there was no need for her to suppress it. What did this mean? It meant that once she recovered her memories, she would be in her peak state. How terrifying would a peak fifth dimension Tendo be? Could she instantly kill a Dao ancestor? Most likely. As they thought of this, the three people's expressions became even uglier. At this moment, Bai Dizzy suddenly said softly, "She has lost her memories. She has lost her strength." White Robe and True Martial looked at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy slowly closed his eyes. In other words, the current her has no strength at all. Hearing this, True Martial narrowed his eyes and a cold light flashed in his eyes. If Moon Yanyan was in her peak state, even if everyone in the doubting joined forces, they would not be her opponent. However, she had lost her memories and strength. Right now she was just an ordinary little girl. A little girl who could be killed with a flick of a finger. At this moment, White Robe suddenly said, "This matter cannot be delayed." Bai Dizzy nodded. Their top priority now was to get rid of Moon Yanyan as soon as possible. Otherwise, who knew when she would regain her memories and strength? Perhaps it would be tomorrow. True Martial suddenly said, "There is another problem. The Dao Tomb." Bai Dizzy stood up. "I will go talk to them." True Martial looked at Bai Dizzy. "What if they can't come to an agreement?" Bai Dizzy did not even turn his head. "Then we will all perish together." True Martial, White Robe, gather all the experts in the doubting. Remember all of them. With that, he had already disappeared into the distance. Dao Tomb City. Bai Dizzy came to the Dao Tomb City alone. He had just entered when Luo Ho appeared in front of him. Yaoyao, Bitter King and Zhang Man were also there. Bai Dizzy went straight to the point. "Moon Yanyan's death is beneficial to both of us." Yaoyao smiled. "It's beneficial to the doubting, right?" Bai Dizzy looked at Yaoyao. "Yaoyao, does the Dao Tomb really want to see such a powerful person appear?" The corners of Yaoyao's mouth curled up. "Why not? Her appearance is not detrimental to us. On the contrary, if she regains her memories and strength, the first person she will kill will be the doubting, right?" Bai Dizzy smiled. "Then let's not talk about it. Perish together." With that, he turned and disappeared into the horizon. Perish together. The smile on Yaoyao's face gradually faded. She knew that the doubting was not joking. Because the doubting had no way out. If they did not get rid of Moon Yanyan now, once Moon Yanyan regained her memories and strength, the doubting's life would be in the hands of Moon Yanyan. It could be said that they would kill Moon Yanyan at all costs. Even if they had to perish together with the Dao Tomb. At this moment, Luo Ho suddenly said, "We cannot interfere." Yaoyao looked at Luo Ho. Luo Ho said softly, "The doubting is already desperate." Yaoyao was silent. Luo Ho looked at Yaoyao. "What do you think?" Yaoyao said, "We have two choices. The first is to watch from the sidelines and let the doubting and Yixian fight to the death while we reap the benefits." Luo Ho said, "The second." Yaoyao said, "The second is to help Yixian fight the doubting until Moon Yanyan regains her memories and strength." The Bitter King suddenly said, "What are the benefits?" Yaoyao said, "The benefit is to form an alliance with the fifth dimension, a true alliance. In the future we will have a powerful ally." The Bitter King shook his head. Luo Ho also shook his head. Ally? They never believed in allies. Moreover, at that time Moon Yanyan's fifth dimension would be suppressing the Dao Tomb. Just as the White Emperor's son had said, they did not wish for someone as powerful as Moon Yanyan to appear. Yaoyao was silent. She already knew everyone's choice. For now, the first choice was the most suitable for the Dao Tomb. Wouldn't it be better to let Yixian and the doubting fight to the death? After all, the Dao Tomb did not need to do anything and they could reap the benefits. If Yixian lost, the Dao Tomb would not suffer any losses. If the doubting lost, it would be a great thing for the Dao Tomb. At this moment, Yaoyao suddenly said, I will go to the 5th dimension. She was about to leave when Luo Ho suddenly said, Celestial Monarch. Yi Xian turned to look at Luo Ho and smiled. You can't be too ruthless. What do you think? Luo Ho was silent for a moment, then said, Have a sense of propriety. Kei Yaoyao did not say anything else and disappeared into the horizon. In the 5th dimension. In the sword hall, Guan Yin walked out with the little girl. At this moment the little girl looked completely different. Her hair had been tied into a braid by Guan Yin. She looked extremely cute. The little girl's appearance was completely different from Sister Nian, but Yi Xian knew that she was Sister Nian. When she saw Yi Xian, Nian ran to his side and grabbed his arm. She looked up at Yi Xian and said, Eat fish. Eat fish. Yi Xian laughed. Let's go, I will roast fish for you. After saying this he pulled Nian out of the hall. Inside the hall, Guan Yin was silent, his expression extremely solemn. Sister Nian's rebirth was naturally a great thing for the 5th dimension. However, there was a fatal problem, and that was that Sister Nian had lost her memories and power. At this time, would the doubting give Sister Nian time? Of course not. The doubting would definitely kill Sister Nian at all costs. The 5th dimension would not be peaceful anymore. Yi Xian brought Nian to a river. This was the place where he and Mu Nian had first met. At that time he did not know that this woman was the Tendo of the 5th dimension. Qing was also there at that time. After Yi Xian caught a few fish from the river, he looked at Nian and said with a smile, Which one do you like? Nian pointed at the largest one with her little finger. Yi Xian laughed. He cleaned up the fish quickly and started a fire to roast it. Nian walked to Yi Xian's side and sat down next to Yi Xian, her eyes fixed on the roasted fish in front of her. Yi Xian suddenly said, Nian, why were you on the street? Nian shook her head. I don't know. Yi Xian turned to look at Nian. Don't you remember why you were on the street? Nian nodded. Yi Xian was silent. Nian's last memory should be on that street. Yi Xian turned to look at Nian. Nian hugged Yi Xian's arm with both hands and said softly, Can I always follow you? Yi Xian smiled and said, Of course you can. Nian looked at Yi Xian. Really? Yi Xian nodded. Really? I'll roast fish for you every day from now on. Nian looked at Yi Xian and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Soon the fish was roasted. Yi Xian lay on the ground and looked at the sky. At this moment he felt that life was really beautiful. Sister Nian was still here. At this moment he was also very glad that he had not done something stupid back then and had properly treated the 5th dimension. The current 5th dimension had never been better, and the creatures of the 5th dimension had never been more united. If Sister Nian recovered her memories and saw the current 5th dimension, how happy would she be? Thinking of this, Yi Xian could not help but feel a little proud. At this moment Nian suddenly said, It's done. After saying that she picked up the roasted fish, tore off a piece of fish and handed it to Yi Xian's mouth. Eat. Yi Xian laughed and bit the piece of fish. Nian blinked. Is it delicious? Yi Xian nodded and said seriously, Of course it's delicious. Don't you see who roasted the fish? Nian giggled. Bolsh **. Yi Xian laughed. At this moment an old man suddenly appeared by the river. The person who had come was Bai Dizzy. Yi Xian glanced at Bai Dizzy and continued eating the fish. Nian was a little wary. She hugged Yi Xian's arm tightly. Bai Dizzy looked at Nian. I miscalculated. I should have destroyed your main body back then. The 5th dimension Tendo was not a human. She was born for the 5th dimension and died for the 5th dimension. Her life was closely related to the 5th dimension. As long as the 5th dimension did not perish, she could live because of the 5th dimension. Of course, the most important thing was that her strength was still there. Her main body was also there. Although her soul had scattered between heaven and earth, it had not shattered. The 5th dimension had condensed her soul again. Yi Xian turned to look at Nian and said with a smile, Don't be afraid. I'm here. Nian nodded slightly and hugged Yi Xian's arm tightly. In the distance, Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, give her to us. Otherwise doubting will destroy you. Yi Xian looked at Bai Dizzy and said with a smile, Come on. Chapter 1397. By the river, Bai Dizzy just stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. Doubting. If you want to die together with me, Yi Xian will welcome you at any time. Bai Dizzy chuckled. Do you think the Dao Tomb land will help you? Yi Xian suddenly looked at Bai Dizzy. Scram. With that he picked up the sword beside him and slashed out. In the distance Bai Dizzy's pupils suddenly shrank. He disappeared on the spot and reappeared tens of thousands of li away. By the river Xian shook his head. It wasn't that he didn't want to kill Bai Dizzy, but that this person wasn't easy to kill. This person might not be good at fighting, but he was first-rate at escaping. As soon as he slashed out with his sword, Bai Dizzy was already tens of thousands of li away. Even the sword chi couldn't catch up. At this moment Nian, who was beside Xian, suddenly said, Why does he want to kill me? Xian collected his thoughts. He looked at Nian and smiled. Don't be afraid. I'm here. Nian nodded. All right. Xian pulled Nian to get up and leave. At this moment, Qin Yaoyao suddenly appeared in front of the two. Qin Yaoyao glanced at Nian and then at Xian. Let's talk. Xian smiled. Let's talk. The three walked along the river into the distance. On the way, Qin Yaoyao said softly, The Dao Tomb land has decided not to interfere. Xian nodded. I guessed it. Qin Yaoyao turned to look at Xian. Is the person behind you going to appear? Xian smiled. No. Qin Yaoyao looked at Xian. Then what do you have to rely on? Xian said softly, I don't have anything to rely on. It's just my life. Qin Yaoyao stared at Xian without saying a word. Xian smiled and said, I'm telling the truth. After a moment of silence, Yan Yaoyao looked at Nian. Nian was a little timid and hid behind Xian. Qin Yaoyao softly said, You must help her recover her memories and strength as soon as possible. Xian shook his head. Let nature take its course. He also wanted Nian to recover her memory and strength, but this matter could not be rushed. Moreover, he had no other way. This matter could only rely on Nian himself. Qin Yaoyao looked at Xian. Are you really going to risk your life? Xian smiled and said, Do I have any other way? Feng Yaoyao was silent. Xian suddenly said, Miss Yaoyao should have other matters to discuss today, right? After a long silence, Qin Yaoyao opened her palm and an ancient scroll appeared in front of Xian. Xian was a little curious. This is. Qi Yaoyao said, Doubting's information. The number of Doubting's experts and trump cards are basically all inside. Of course, I can't be sure if Doubting has other trump cards, but Doubting's experts are basically all inside. Xian put away the scroll. Thank you. Qin Yaoyao shook her head. It's just a small favor. Saying that, she glanced at Nian. Because of my position, I can't help you anymore. Take care. After saying that, her figure trembled and disappeared. In the same place, Xian was silent. At this moment, a phantom suddenly appeared not far from Xian. The phantom gradually solidified. It was a black-robed man. Xian flicked his finger and a token appeared in front of the black-robed man. This black-robed man was none other than the mysterious person who had given him the ice coffin. The mysterious person looked at Xian. I'll help you once. Xian smiled. Senior, can you beat a Dao Attainment Realm expert? The mysterious person shook his head. I can't, but I can barely hold up a Dao Attainment Realm expert. Xian nodded. That's enough. After saying that, he pulled Nian away. In the same place, the mysterious person was silent for a long time before saying softly, Dai, are you really going to bully his son? How dare you? After saying that, he disappeared without a sound. At the end of the distance, Nian held Xian's hand tightly. Is someone coming to beat us up? Xian smiled. Yes. Are you afraid? Nian looked at Xian and asked, Are you afraid? Xian blinked. A little. Nian hesitated for a moment before saying, Then I'm a little afraid too. Xian laughed. After a moment, Nian said again, Are they going to beat me up? Xian nodded. Yes. Nian said, Will you protect me? Xian said, Yes. Nian said, What if you can't beat them? Xian said, What do you think I should do? Nian said, If you hand me over, will they stop beating you up? Xian said, No, their goal is to kill you and then kill me. After a long time, Nian said again, Why are you protecting me? Xian said, There's no reason. I just want to protect you. Nian said softly, But there should be a reason for everything. Xian said, Because I like you, so I'm protecting you. Is that a good reason? Nian Nian stopped in her tracks. She looked at Yi Xian and asked seriously, do you really like me? Yi Xian nodded. Nian Nian asked again, why? Yi Xian was speechless. Nian Nian said, why do you like me? There must be a reason. Yi Xian asked, why do you like eating fish? Nian Nian said, if you like it then eat it. There's no reason. Yi Xian smiled and said, I like you like fish. If I like you then I like you. There's no reason. Nian Nian said, but I'm not a fish. After a moment of silence Yi Xian said, why don't we change the topic? Nian Nian said, all right. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Nian Nian said, what do you like about me? Yi Xian said, I like everything. Nian Nian said, why do you like everything? I like eating fish but I don't like fish bones. There must be something about me that you don't like. Yi Xian fell silent. Nian Nian said, why? Yi Xian said, I don't like it when you lie to me. Nian Nian blinked. Have I ever lied to you? Yi Xian nodded. In my dream we went to a place. You lied to me and said that we would definitely come back together but you didn't. Nian Nian held Yi Xian's hand and said with some heartache, don't be angry. I won't lie to you next time. Yi Xian smiled and said, it's a deal. Nian Nian said seriously, definitely. Soon the two of them disappeared at the end of the river hand in hand. In the sky above the fifth dimension, Ying Yao Yao looked down and remained silent. Beside her was Luo Hua. Luo Hua said in a deep voice, the doubting has already gathered all the experts. Everyone who is in seclusion except for the Dao ancestors has already rushed to the heaven abyss. Ying Yao Yao was silent. Luo Hua said, the doubting is going to destroy everything this time. They will kill Moon Yin Yin at all costs. Saying so he looked at Ying Yao Yao. Heavenly Monarch, I know you love talent but this Yi Xian is a huge whirlpool. Our Dao burial mound cannot be dragged into this whirlpool, or we will be consigned to eternal damnation. Ying Yao Yao nodded. I understand. Luo Hua sighed. To be honest, I also admire this Yi Xian. Unfortunately he is not from our Dao burial mound. Ying Yao Yao suddenly said, Luo Hua, do you think our Dao burial mound should change? Luo Hua looked at Ying Yao Yao. What do you want to change? Ying Yao Yao smiled. What are we fighting for? Luo Hua was silent. Ying Yao Yao looked at Luo Hua. We are fighting for our own interests. Back then we became Dao breakers because the great Dao was unfair. We fought for the beliefs in our hearts. But now our Dao burial mound has lost its beliefs. No one is fighting for their own interests. If we destroy the doubting we will be the next doubting. Luo Hua said nothing. Ying Yao Yao said softly, our original intentions. We don't know when but we have forgotten our original intentions. Why can't anyone create a new path on the path of Dao breakers? Because we are no different from the doubting in the first place. With that she turned and left. Luo Hua said in a low voice, where are you going? In the distance Qi Yao Yao didn't even look back. Follow my heart. With that she disappeared into the distance. Luo Hua was silent. Yi Xian didn't bring Nian Nian back to the sword hall. Instead he brought her to the fourth dimension. The nether hall. Yi Xian came to this place again. The hall was deserted with only a few statues. Yi Xian looked at the statues and said softly, is anyone there? No response. Yi Xian was silent for a long time. Then he turned and left with Nian Nian. Outside the hall Yi Xian wasn't disappointed. He didn't put his hopes on others. It was naturally good for him to find a helper, but it didn't matter if he couldn't. Meanwhile, a voice suddenly resounded within the hall. Is there something you need? Yi Xian turned around and looked into the hall but there was no one there. Yi Xian bowed slightly. May I know who it is? The voice resounded once more. Is there something you need? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, does Senior know about doubting? The voice replied, I don't. Yi Xian was speechless. The voice spoke again. Is there something you need? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Senior, can you help me with something? The voice fell silent for a moment before it said, what is it? Yi Xian said, fight. The voice fell silent. Yi Xian waited silently for an answer. After a long time the voice resounded once more. Someone has told me. I don't want to help you. Yi Xian blinked. Who? Who? The voice replied, someone you know. Yi Xian was quite stunned. Someone I know? Could it be that mysterious expert within Yiling's body? Or perhaps it's that woman with the spear. Meanwhile, the voice spoke again. Your path is very long and you have to walk it yourself. The path you walk is the path that belongs to you. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Senior Doubting wants to gang up on me. There are many of them. The voice replied, deal with it yourself. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, can you help me a little? The voice replied, no. Yi Xian laughed miserably. Forget it. In any case, I've been orphaned since I was young and I've had to endure all sorts of disasters. Alas, let's not talk about it. It's meaningless to talk about it. In any case, I'm an orphan. I'll get used to it. I'll get used to it. As he spoke, he pulled Nian Nian towards the distance. At this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from within the hall. Wait. P.S. Thank you for your monthly votes and tips, thank you. Thank you for your support. I'm going to buy a car soon. Do you have any suggestions? A two-wheeled one. Chapter 1398. Outside the Nether Palace, Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. At this moment, the voice sounded from inside the palace. We are too far away from here, do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, the voice sounded again. No one knew what the voice said, but Yi Xian suddenly looked happy. He bowed slightly to the Nether Palace, then turned around and left with Nian Nian. Yi Xian returned to the fifth dimension with Nian Nian, and at this moment the fifth dimension was on full alert. Yi Xian arrived at the Sword Sect, where hundreds of swordsmen from the Sword Sect were already waiting. All the swordsmen had reached the self-release realm. Although they were only at the self-release realm, they had the strength to fight Dao Validation realm. But this was not enough. Yi Xian found Senior Sister Lu and took out a storage ring and handed it to her. Senior Sister Lu looked at Yi Xian. What's inside? Yi Xian smiled. Look. Senior Sister Lu glanced at it and the next moment her expression changed drastically. This? Inside the storage ring were some divine objects. Those were the treasures of the Jiaolong clan. Among them there were countless treasures of the Dao Validation realm. Although there were few treasures of the Dao Validation realm, there were still some. After all, Yi Xian's soul-suppressing sword was only at the Dao Validation realm. Senior Sister Lu looked at Yi Xian. Where did you go to rob? Yi Xian smiled. A senior gave it to me. After a moment of silence, Senior Sister Lu said, with this equipment my sword sect swordsman can kill Dao Validation realm. Gun Yan and the others can kill Dao Validation realm. Yi Xian nodded. Okay. After saying that, he turned around and left with Nian Nian. At this moment, Senior Sister Lu suddenly said, are you confident? Yi Xian stopped and turned to look at Senior Sister Lu, smiling. No. Senior Lu fell silent. Yi Xian gently rubbed Nian Nian's little head and said with a smile, Senior Martial Sister, can you summon the Patriarch of the Sword Sect? Senior Sister Lu shook her head. Yi Xian shrugged. Others can summon their ancestors. Senior Sister Lu, you should also summon your ancestor. Senior Apprentice Sister Lu glared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian laughed and left with Nian Nian. Yi Xian brought Nian Nian to the sword hall. He took out the world prison pagoda. At this moment, a woman appeared in front of him. Najilu. He was the last dragon of the Jia Dragon clan. Jialo looked at Yi Xian. I want to cultivate a Dao body. Can I? Yi Xian blinked. Can you cultivate? Jialo nodded. Grandfather said that I can cultivate, but he doesn't think he will give it to me. Yi Xian smiled and said, I'll teach. Jialo looked at Yi Xian. Really? Yi Xian nodded. But you have to help me fight. Jialo took out a stick of Tonghulu and licked it. Then he said, no problem. Next, Yi Xian began to teach Jialo the Dao body. In fact, if time allowed, he wanted to teach Xianxia and the others the Dao body. Unfortunately, time did not allow it. Moreover, the Dao body was not easy to cultivate. This was because Xianxia and the others had weak physical bodies. The reason he could cultivate it so quickly was because his physical body's foundation was very, very strong. In the five-dimensional universe, there was almost no one whose physical body had reached his level. Of course, Jialo was one of them. She was a member of the Dragon clan, so her physical body was naturally strong. Once she cultivated a Dao body and reached the Dao defense realm, the strength of her physical body would definitely be above his. If Jialo could cultivate a Dao body, she would definitely be able to fight a Dao realization realm expert. Even if she could not win, she would definitely be able to fight a Dao realization realm expert. In the following time, Yi Xian taught Jialo the Dao body every day to accompany Nian Nian. Of course he did not forget about doubting. In a certain hall Yi Xian sat to the side and roasted fish. Beside him was Nian Nian and in front of him stood a black-robed old man. The black-robed old man bowed slightly to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, doubting experts have already rushed to the celestial abyss. I'm afraid they will come to the five-dimensional universe in the next few days. Young Master Yi, please make early preparations. Yi Xian said, how many in total? The black-robed old man looked at Yi Xian. Anyone who has reached the Dao confirmation realm has gone to the celestial abyss. In addition, this time, doubting will probably use some trump cards that have never been used before. Also, that Dao ancestor is very likely to appear. Young Master Yi, you must make early preparations. Yi Xian was silent. The black-robed old man cupped his fists. If doubting makes any new moves, this old man will inform young Master Yi immediately. Goodbye. After saying that, he was about to leave. At this time Yi Xian suddenly said, thank the celestial king for me. The black-robed old man nodded. This old man will definitely deliver it. After saying that, he disappeared. In the hall Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. At this time Nian Nian suddenly said softly, are they all here to beat me? Yi Xian shook his head. No, they're all here to beat me. Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian. You lied to me. Yi Xian said with a smile, all right. They're all here to beat me. Nian Nian blinked. Why? Just because I stole the fish? But I'm really hungry. I won't steal fish next time. Yi Xian gently rubbed Nian Nian's head and said softly, what's a mere fish? Our entire fifth dimension owes her. If not for Sister Nian, would the fifth dimension still exist? It probably wouldn't even exist anymore. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the entire fifth dimension owes her. At this time Guanyin walked in. Guanyin looked at Yi Xian. The fifth dimension is ready. Yi Xian said, the battlefield cannot be in the fifth dimension. Guanyin nodded. If the battlefield was in the fifth dimension, once a fight broke out, regardless of whether the fifth dimension won or lost, it would still suffer heavy losses. Guanyin said in a deep voice, but their goal is not only to kill Miss Nian, but also to destroy the fifth dimension. Yi Xian was silent. The current doubting must have learned to be smart. Killing Sister Nian was not enough. If they wanted to get rid of future troubles, they had to destroy the entire fifth dimension. As long as the entire fifth dimension was destroyed, there would be no possibility of Sister Nian being reborn. At this time Guanyin said softly, it would be great if Miss Nian could regain her memory. The current fifth dimension no longer needed Mu Nian to suppress it. Once Mu Nian regained her memory, doubting and the Dao tomb would be like ants to her. Therefore doubting would definitely destroy the fifth dimension. But would Sister Nian regain her memory? Yi Xian glanced at Nian Nian next to him. He was not sure either. Sister Nian had really forgotten everything in the past. As for when she would regain her memory, no one knew. Yi Xian was silent for a moment before smiling. It's okay, I'll take care of it this time. Guanyin looked at Yi Xian. Can you take care of it? Yi Xian smiled. Don't we still have you? Guanyin was stunned for a moment before smiling. Let's take care of it together. Yi Xian said, have Jiao and Arrow come out of seclusion. Guanyin said in a low voice, soon. Yi Xian nodded. That's good. After explaining some matters to Guanyin left. Yi Xian continued to roast fish, but his thoughts had already drifted away. Doubting had two Dao realm experts. One was a Dao ancestor and the other had disappeared for many years. Even the Dao tomb did not know who he was. And now, the only ones who could kill Yi Xian single-handedly were powerhouses at the Dao attainment realm. If he used the power of his bloodline, he might be able to fight a Dao realm expert head-on. It should be a 3 to 7 chance. But if doubting and two Dao realm experts attacked together, he would not stand a chance. Two Dao realm experts were definitely not people he could fight against at the moment. After all, only his physical body had reached the Dao Imperial realm. His realm had not reached the Dao Imperial realm. Fighting one Dao realm expert would be difficult, let alone two. Apart from the experts of the Dao realm, if Shen Wu and the white-robed experts ganged up on him, he would not have much confidence in winning. These two people were infinitely close to the Dao realm. This time doubting would definitely not give him a chance. They would definitely choose to gang up on him. And now, there were basically no other people in the fifth dimension, especially Dao Imperial realm experts. Doubting divine lords, however, had a total of 76. What did this mean? This was equivalent to a total of 76 Dao manipulation realm experts in the Dao court. Doubting Dao realm experts below the Dao imperial realm had a total of 167. 167. Could be said that in terms of lineup, doubting had completely crushed the fifth dimension. Moreover, this was only the doubting's strength on the surface. The Dao tomb did not know whether doubting had more trump cards. How could they fight? Inside the hall, Xian was quietly roasting fish. At this moment, Nian suddenly hugged Xian's arm and said softly, "Did I drag you into this?" Xian looked at Nian and said with a smile, "No. I dragged you into this." Without him, Xian's sister Nian would not have fallen back then. Nian looked up at Xian. "Those dreams I had were not dreams, right?" Xian hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Nian had only lost her memory. In fact, she was not stupid at all. Nian looked at Xian. "I lost my memory. Am I right?" Xian nodded. Nian asked again, "Was I very powerful before?" Xian laughed. "Powerful. Very, very powerful. It is known as the fourth sword in the world." Nian blinked. "There are 3 more swords?" Xian nodded. "Yes." Nian lowered her head slightly. Xian asked softly, "What's wrong?" Nian hugged Xian's arm tightly with both hands. "I can't remember anything." Xian smiled and said, "It's okay. If you can't remember, don't force yourself to remember." Nian looked at Xian. "But I want to help." Xian gently rubbed Nian's little head. "You've already helped me a lot. This time let me help you once, okay?" Nian looked at Xian and didn't say a word. At that moment, Xian suddenly looked up. He saw a familiar old man in the starry sky. "By Dizzy. He's here." In the hall, Xian smiled. Then he pulled Nian to her feet and walked out of the hall. Nian held Xian's hand. "Can I call you brother?" In the distance, Xian shook his head. "No." Nian was a little puzzled. "Why?" Xian said, "I'm afraid that he'll hit me after he recovers his memories." Nian blinked. "Can't you beat me?" Xian hesitated for a moment and was about to speak when Nian suddenly said, "You promised me. Don't lie to me." Xian was a little helpless. "I can't beat him. He might shatter my Dao body with one punch." Nian giggled and held Xian's hand tightly. "Don't be afraid. I won't hit him in the future." Xian hurriedly said, "Keep your promise." Nian said seriously, "Pinky swear." As she spoke, she extended a finger. Xian laughed. Then he also extended a finger. Just like that, the 2 fingers gently hooked together. Outside the hall, someone said, "I'll protect you in the future." Chapter 1399. In the 5-dimensional universe, in the starry sky, Bai Dizzy looked down at the 5-dimensional universe with a calm expression. Mu Nian. The moment he learned that Mu Nian had been reborn, he really panicked. Oh, it was fear. Mu Nian. This woman had shattered the physical body of a Dao ancestor with only 30% of her strength. Once this woman regained her memory, she could destroy doubting in the blink of an eye. Fortunately, this woman had lost her memory and strength. At this moment, Xian suddenly appeared in front of Bai Dizzy. Beside Xian was Nian. Bai Dizzy glanced at Xian, then at Nian. This time Nian was not afraid. She looked at Bai Dizzy, her right hand holding Xian's hand tightly. Bai Dizzy suddenly looked at Xian. "Just one person?" Xian smiled. "Of course not." Bai Dizzy nodded. "I'm looking forward to it." As soon as he finished speaking, the starry sky behind him suddenly split open. Then countless powerful auras surged out like a tide. The first to come out were White Robe and Zhen Wu, and behind them stood 76 gods. All of them were Dao Defense Realm. And behind these 76 people, there were 167 Dao Validation Realm powerhouses. Could be said that all the powerhouses of doubting had come out. This time doubting was fighting with its back to the wall. Although the strength of the 5-dimensional universe was not as strong as doubting, once Mu Nian regained her memory, the situation would be reversed. Therefore either Mu Nian died or doubting perished. Bai Dizzy looked at Xian. "Xian, you can call the person behind you out." Xian nodded. He turned his head and saw a black-robed man not far away. It was the black-robed man who had given him the ice coffin. This man in black had a mysterious background. Yi Xian did not know his name, and he did not ask because the other party did not seem to want to have too much karma with him. This time the other party was here to help fight. After the fight the other party would probably leave. Bai Dizzy glanced at the man in black and then looked at Yi Xian. Anything else? Yi Xian smiled and said, not for now. Bai Dizzy stared at Yi Xian. He suddenly felt uneasy. Because Yi Xian was too calm. Based on his understanding of Yi Xian, for this guy to be so calm he definitely had something to rely on. But what did this guy have to rely on? The Dao tomb would no longer interfere. Did this guy really come from the Saha world? Bai Dizzy did not believe it at all. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, Bai Dizzy, what are you waiting for? Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, why don't you attack together? Bai Dizzy stared at Yi Xian. Deliberately mystifying. Then he looked at the black-robed man not far away. Your Excellency is? The black-robed man said, I'm helping him fight, that's all. Bai Dizzy was expressionless. Your Excellency, no matter what price he offers I will doubting double it. The black-robed man shook his head. It has nothing to do with money. Bai Dizzy was about to say something when the black-robed man suddenly said, cut the crap. Then he looked at Yi Xian. Who should I fight? Yi Xian pointed at Zhen Wu and White Robe in the distance. Those two. The black-robed man said, I can only hold them back. Yi Xian nodded. That's enough. The black-robed man nodded. The next moment he disappeared on the spot. In the distance Zhen Wu looked at White Robe. I'll hold him back. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed forward. The sound of something tearing resounded. Boom. The space in front of Zhen Wu suddenly trembled violently. The next moment he was blasted back dozens of feet. Seeing this scene, Bai Dizzy's expression darkened. This black-robed man was actually so strong? Zhen Wu gripped his sword tightly with his right hand. A powerful sword momentum gathered in his sword. At this moment the black-robed man appeared in front of him again. The black-robed man threw a punch. A simple punch. A ruthless look flashed in Zhen Wu's eyes. He slashed with his sword. This sword seemed to be able to shatter the starry sky. Boom. The area where the two of them were exploded and turned into nothingness. White Robe didn't attack. Even though Zhen Wu was at a disadvantage, it was still very difficult for the black-robed man to kill Zhen Wu. White Robe looked at Yi Xian. He doesn't seem to be able to fight two at once. Yi Xian fell silent. At this moment, a sword howl resounded in the sky. In the next moment, a little girl suddenly appeared in front of White Robe. Hey. Yi Xian looked at Xiaoqi and was stunned. He said, Xiaoqi, didn't you go to the third dimension? Xiaoqi glanced at Yi Xian. You're back. Yi Xian blinked. Can you win? Xiaoqi said, I'll give it a try. As soon as she finished speaking she turned around and slashed with her sword. This slash caused White Robe's brows to instantly knit together. It was a very powerful strike. In the distance, Bai Dizzy's expression instantly sank. Where did this little girl come from? Very quickly Xiaoqi and White Robe started fighting. The two of them were evenly matched. It had to be said that Yi Xian was a little shocked. Xiaoqi was actually so strong. At this moment Bai Dizzy suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Letting someone stall White Robe and Zhen Wu. Obviously there is someone else, right? Yi Xian shook his head. There is no one else. Bai Dizzy stared at Yi Xian. Then is everything going to end? Yi Xian smiled. Bai Dizzy, I'll give you a big gift. With that he sent Nian Nian into the prison pagoda. After Nian Nian returned to the prison pagoda, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Bai Dizzy stared at Yi Xian. He slowly clenched his fists. As for the Sir Gods behind him, they were extremely vigilant. Against Yi Xian they naturally did not dare to be careless. At this moment there was a sudden pft sound from behind Yi Xian's buttocks. Everyone was stunned. The next moment, everyone's expression turned extremely ugly. Bullsh asteriski. Yi Xian was farting. At this moment Yi Xian took a deep breath. He looked at Bai Dizzy and smiled. This fart is my gift to you. Do you like it? Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian calmly. Attack. The God Lords behind him dashed toward Yi Xian as soon as he finished speaking. These God Lords were extremely fast. In a blink of an eye they arrived in front of Yi Xian. At this moment Yi Xian's lips curled up. The next moment hundreds of thousands of energy swords flew out of his body. These energy swords were condensed from turbid gas. When he saw the energy swords, Bai Dizzy's expression changed. Retreat. Retreat quickly. However, it was too late. The dozen godlords who were charging at the front were turned into beehives by the energy swords. Even Dao Attainment Realm experts did not dare to belittle the turbid gas. How could Dao Manipulation Realm experts withstand it? More than a dozen divine lords were caught off guard and were killed immediately. As for the remaining divine lords, they reacted quickly and retreated rapidly. This retreat took them tens of thousands of feet away. At this moment, hundreds of thousands of energy swords were circling around Zhou Xian. Bai Dizzy looked at Zhou Xian in disbelief. This is the turbid gas of Dark World. He is not afraid of the turbid gas. Zhou Xian smiled. Are you surprised? With that, he suddenly disappeared. The next moment, hundreds of thousands of energy swords slashed at Bai Dizzy and the rest like a storm. The expressions of the divine monarchs and Dao Vindication experts changed drastically when they saw this scene. If it was just the energy swords, they would not be afraid at all. Zhou Xian's current strength was not enough to kill a Dao Validation Realm expert with energy swords. Moreover, he was controlling so many energy swords. However, this was no ordinary sword chi. It was turbid gas. Not to mention Dao Validation Realm experts, even Dao Attainment Realm experts did not dare to touch the turbid gas. Once they did, they would immediately enter the Heavenly Decay Stage 5 and die. Bai Dizzy did not hesitate. Retreat. Everyone retreat immediately. After receiving the order, the Dao Attainment Realm experts and Dao Validation Realm experts retreated rapidly. It didn't take long for them to leave the fifth dimension. At this moment, White Robe and Zhenwu stopped as well. When they looked at Zhou Xian, their eyes were solemn. Turbid gas. The reason why the Doubting Realm and the Dao Tomb could not be fully developed was because of the turbid gas. Not to mention ordinary doubting experts, even the two of them did not dare to belittle the turbid gas. But they did not expect that Zhou Xian was not afraid of the turbid gas. Moreover, he had condensed the turbid gas into swords. How did he do it? Bai Dizzy stared fixedly at Zhou Xian. How is it possible that he is not afraid of the turbid gas? Zhou Xian said with a smile, guess. Bai Dizzy looked at Zhou Xian for a moment and then he smiled. Zhou Xian, you have really given us all a pleasant surprise. A great surprise. Zhou Xian suddenly pointed with his fingers, and a strand of sword chi slashed directly at Bai Dizzy. The moment the sword chi flew out, Bai Dizzy had already appeared tens of thousands of meters away. Zhou Xian was silent when he saw this. Damn it. This old fart was not good at fighting, but his escaping skills were the fastest he had seen so far. Bai Dizzy suddenly said, let's go. With that he turned and left. White Robe and Zhenwu followed him. In the starry sky, Zhou Xian slowly closed his eyes. He knew that this matter was not over. The next time the doubting came, it would not be the Dao Attainment Realm. The Dao Attainment Realm. Currently, the greatest threat to Zhou Xian was the Dao Attainment Realm. In the Heaven Abyss, even though the Dao Attainment Realm old man was afraid of the turbid gas, he was not especially afraid. However, he did not dare go deep into the Heaven Abyss because it was filled with turbid gas. But Zhou Xian was unable to fill the entire fifth dimension with turbid gas. Meanwhile, Xiaoqi appeared by Zhou Xian's side. What do you plan to do next? Zhou Xian looked at Xiaoqi. Protect the fifth dimension for me. Xiaoqi nodded. All right. Zhou Xian looked at the black-clothed man, and the latter hesitated for a moment before he said, I have already helped. Zhou Xian tapped with his finger, and a spatial ring appeared in front of the black-clothed man. Within the spatial ring were over 10,000 fortune divine crystals. Zhou Xian looked at the black-clothed man. Senior, 10,000 fortune divine crystals for each time you help. Will you do it or not? The black-clothed man was slightly hesitant. At this time Zhou Xian tapped with his finger again, and a spatial ring appeared in front of the black-clothed man. Inside were 20,000 fortune divine crystals. The black-clothed man put away the two spatial rings. I will live and die with the fifth dimension. The doubting and I are absolutely irreconcilable. Zhou Xian. P.S. I am not asking for tickets because I know that there are no more. Chapter 1400. Zhou Xian shook his head and smiled when he heard the black-clothed man. The fortune divine crystals were great treasures. Even an expert like the black-clothed man couldn't refuse them. However, it made sense. The fortune divine crystals were practically controlled by the Dao Ting and the Dao Tomb, so it was extremely difficult for outsiders to obtain them. Zhou Xian frowned when he thought up to this point. He had a few tens of millions of fortune divine crystals. He didn't just have a few tens of millions of fortune divine crystals, he even had a few super top-grade mines. A conservative estimate was that these mines produced at least 5 to 6 million fortune divine crystals every year. Since it was like that, why didn't he recruit more Dao-controlling realm experts? Even though the doubting was powerful, there would definitely be brave people who would come to the fifth dimension with great rewards. So long as the price was right, then there would definitely be people who would come to the fifth dimension. Thinking up to this point, Zhou Xian immediately called Guan Yin over. He thought for a moment and then said, Guan Yin, write a recruitment order for me. Just say that as long as any expert at the Dao Corroboration or Dao Defense realm comes to the fifth dimension to help, Dao Corroboration realm experts will be given 10,000 fortune divine crystals for every time they help. Dao Corroboration realm experts will be given 3,000 fortune divine crystals for every time they help. Guan Yin glanced at Zhou Xian and nodded. All right. She turned around and left once she finished speaking. Zhou Xian gazed at the black-clothed man. Senior, what's your name? The black-clothed man hesitated for a moment and said, Li Zhua. Zhou Xian nodded. Senior Li Zhua, do you know any other formidable experts? Li Zhua thought for a moment and said, I do know one or two. Zhou Xian was delighted. Senior Li Zhua, can you call them over? Li Zhua fell silent. Zhou Xian smiled. I won't force them. Li Zhua shook his head. I'll give it a try. Zhou Xian hurriedly cupped his fists. Thank you. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Li Zhua gazed at Zhou Xian from afar and no one knew what he was thinking. In truth, he hadn't stayed behind for the fortune divine crystal. This thing was very important to him, but it wasn't the real reason he had stayed behind. The reason why he stayed was because he wanted to form a good relationship. Others might not know this guy's background, but he did. That azure-robed man from back then was so powerful that it made people despair. It was truly hopeless. Even at his current level, he still felt hopeless every time he thought of the green-robed man. A moment later, Li Zhua turned around and left. Somewhere in the starry sky, Luo Ho and the others were silent. They were present when doubting came to the fifth dimension. At this moment, Luo Ho and the others wore extremely solemn expressions. Zhou Xian was not afraid of the turbid air. Moreover, he had even condensed the turbid air into a sword. This was something they had never expected. Meanwhile, Bitter King spoke abruptly. He went to the depths of the dark dimension. Luo Ho nodded. The commotion in the dark world must have something to do with him. Zhang Man's expression was cold. He must have obtained countless fortune divine crystals. Suddenly, Qin Yaoyao said, Don't worry about the fortune divine crystals. You should be wondering why he could go to the depths of the dark world and not fear the turbid gas. Zhang Man was silent. Luo Ho looked at Qin Yaoyao. What do you think? Qin Yaoyao looked down at the fifth dimension and said softly, Haven't you noticed? He can always do things that we think are impossible. Luo Ho and the others were silent. Ever since they met Zhou Xian was too mysterious. Even he, Luo Ho, did not dare to enter the dark world with the turbid air. And this guy had clearly entered the depths of the dark world. Not only did he enter, but he was also not afraid of the turbid air. This guy had condensed the turbid air into a sword. This guy's body could not only absorb swords but also the turbid air? At this moment, Qin Yaoyao suddenly said, What do you think doubting will do next? Doubting. Luo Ho said softly, They will definitely not give up. If I am not wrong, the Dao ancestor should be coming out soon. Qin Yaoyao shook her head. Not enough. A Dao ancestor cannot destroy the current fifth dimension. Luo Ho looked at Qin Yaoyao. Why? Qi Yaoyao said, Do you think Zhou Xian is afraid of a Dao attainment expert? Luo Ho and the others were silent. At this moment, Qi Yaoyao said, Actually, we have two choices. The first is to wait and see, then reap the benefits. The second is to help Zhou Xian. Bitter King looked at Qin Yaoyao. What about the benefits? Qin Yaoyao glanced at Bitter King. Benefits? Why do you only care about the benefits in front of you? With that, she turned and disappeared into the horizon. In the field, Luo Ho was silent. Help Zhou Xian? It was not that he had not thought of it, but the risk was too great. The current situation was the most stable for the Dao burial mound. Inside the sword hall, Zhou Xian and Yan Yan sat side by side. Grilled fish. Yan Yan stared at the golden grilled fish in front of her, her saliva almost flowing out. She spent most of her time with Yi Xian roasting fish. In fact, she did not know why she liked eating fish. She just liked it. Although Yi Xian was roasting fish, his thoughts had already drifted outside the hall. At this moment, Nian Nian suddenly said, "How can I recover my memories?" Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and looked at Nian Nian. "You want to recover your memories?" Nian Nian nodded and said softly, "Once I recover my memories, I can help you." Yi Xian was stunned, then smiled and said, "It's okay, I can still bear it." Nian Nian lowered her head slightly and did not speak. Yi Xian gently rubbed Nian Nian's little head. "Do you know? You've done enough for this world. You have let down the entire five-dimensional universe. You have already handed the heavy responsibility of protecting the five-dimensional universe to me. Then let me bear it." Nian Nian was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Your fish is ready." Nian Nian looked at the roasted fish and sniffed it with her nose. Then she revealed an intoxicated expression. Soon she tore off a piece of fish and placed it in front of Yi Xian's mouth. Yi Xian laughed. He was really enjoying every moment he spent with Nian Nian. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian glanced at Jiao Lu in the pagoda. When he saw Jiao Lu, he was stunned. Gradually, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Jiao Lu was going to succeed. If Jiao Lu cultivated a Dao body, then she would definitely be able to block a Dao Attainment Realm expert. And Dao Ting had 2 Dao Attainment Realm experts. Thinking of this, the smile on Yi Xian's face gradually disappeared. For now, the five-dimensional universe still did not have a good chance of winning. It was not enough. He had to reach the Dao Attainment Realm. Thinking of this, Yi Xian got up and left with Nian Nian. The best way to improve was to fight. Doubting. At this time, the atmosphere in Doubting was extremely solemn. This time, almost all of Doubting's forces had attacked. However, not only did they not gain an advantage, but Yi Xian had also killed more than a dozen Dao Attainment Realm experts. Turbid Qi. Yi Xian could actually control Turbid Qi. It had to be said that this made many of Doubting's experts extremely afraid. In a large hall, basically all of Doubting's experts were gathered here. Everyone in the hall was at the Dao Attainment Realm. Leading them were Bai Dizzy, Zhen Wu and White Robe. At this moment, an old man suddenly said softly, "How can he absorb the Turbid Qi? Where's the Turbid Qi? Absorb Turbid Qi." In the hall, everyone looked at Bai Dizzy. In fact, there was still some resentment in everyone's hearts. Bai Dizzy's intelligence skills were not good enough. Bai Dizzy was silent. He did not know that Yi Xian could absorb Turbid Qi. Why was this guy not afraid of Turbid Qi? Bai Dizzy was puzzled no matter how he thought about it. Zhen Wu suddenly said, "Bai Dizzy, aren't you going to say something?" Bai Dizzy said softly, "Every time I think I understand him, he gives me a new surprise." As he spoke, he shook his head with a bitter feeling in his heart. He had never underestimated Yi Xian, but Yi Xian would always surprise him. Just like this time, he thought that the people behind Yi Xian would show up, but they didn't. Yi Xian had used the Turbid Qi to drive them away. Even Dao Attainment Realm experts didn't dare to underestimate Turbid Qi. How could Yi Xian not be afraid of Turbid Qi? Meanwhile, the white-robed man spoke abruptly, "Don't forget 2 things. The first is that Moon Yanyan. Even though she's temporarily lost her memories and strength, destroying our Dao court would be as easy as flicking her finger once she recovers her memories." Everyone was silent. Once Moon Yanyan regained her memories, Doubting would be finished immediately. Because the five-dimensional universe no longer needed Moon Yanyan to suppress it. Once Moon Yanyan regained her memories, it would mean that her strength would reach its peak, the true peak. At that time, Doubting would be like a chicken in front of her. At this moment, White Robe spoke again. "The second thing is Yi Xian. Once he reaches Dao Attainment Realm, the price we have to pay to kill him will be more than 10 times higher than it is now." Everyone was silent. Once Yi Xian reached Dao Attainment Realm, it could be said that even if White Robe and Zhen Wu joined forces, they might not be able to do anything to him. At this moment, Bai Dizzy suddenly said, "Wait." Everyone looked at Bai Dizzy, and Bai Dizzy said solemnly, "At most 5 days, the Tao ancestor will come out of seclusion." Tao ancestor. Hearing this, everyone's expression instantly relaxed. That was the true backbone of Doubting. Meanwhile, a sword howl suddenly resounded from outside the hall. In the next moment, everyone raised their heads and looked over. A young man was walking slowly towards the southern gate with a sword in his hand. "Yi Xian." The expressions of all the experts within the hall instantly changed when they saw Yi Xian. What's this fellow doing here? In the next moment, all the experts within the hall had appeared at the southern gate. In an instant, all of them surrounded Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at the doubting experts that had suddenly appeared around him and he smiled. So many of you? Bai Dizzy gazed at Yi Xian and said, What? You intend to fight all of us by yourself? Yi Xian opened his palm. In the next moment, countless energy swords condensed from death energy appeared around him. All the experts of doubting retreated explosively when they witnessed this scene. The expressions of Bai Dizzy and the others instantly became solemn. Yi Xian smiled and said, Don't run. I've come here this time to ask for a favor from all of you. Bai Dizzy frowned slightly and said, Ask for our help? Are you sure? Yi Xian nodded. I've been at the Dao control realm for too long and I want to break through. I want all of you to help me. Bai Dizzy gazed at Yi Xian and said, Have you gone mad? Yi Xian gazed at Zhenwu and said, Zhenwu, I've never fought you in the past. Now let's fight again. Zhenwu gazed at Yi Xian and said, You want to fight me and then charge into the Dao control realm. Yi Xian nodded and said, I won't utilize foul energy. Zhenwu stared fixedly at Yi Xian and said, Do you think I'll agree? Yi Xian pointed at the white-robed figures and said, Both of you attack me together. Attack him together. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. Chapter 1401. Together. No one expected Yi Xian to challenge Shen Wu and White Robe. 1 against 2. Was Yi Xian crazy? Although Yi Xian was a genius, Shen Wu and the white-robed man could be said to be the strongest people in the Dao court who had achieved the Dao. And now he wanted to fight 1 against 2? Shen Wu looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Beside him, White Robe kept silent with his eyes closed. Yi Xian smiled. Why are you refusing? Shen Wu looked at Yi Xian in silence. At this moment, Bai Dizzy's voice suddenly sounded in Shen Wu's mind. This person must have something to rely on. Shen Wu said in a low voice, But this is also our chance. A chance to kill him. Isn't that right? Bai Dizzy was silent. If Shen Wu and White Robe joined forces, they would have a chance to kill Yi Xian. But if they couldn't kill him, it was very likely that Yi Xian would reach Dao defense. At this moment, White Robe suddenly opened his eyes. Why think so much? Let's just fight. As his voice fell, he suddenly rushed forward. The next moment, a silver light appeared half an inch between Yi Xian's eyebrows. The reason why it didn't pierce through was because a sword had pierced the body of that spear. Seeing that his attack had missed, White Robe suddenly swept his spear horizontally. Swoosh. With a sweep, space was torn apart. Yi Xian blocked it with his sword. Boom. Under the spear, Yi Xian instantly retreated hundreds of feet away. But just as he stopped, a silver spear pierced through the air. Yi Xian straightened his sword and slashed forward. Boom. A wave of sword light exploded in the field. Yi Xian retreated hundreds of feet again. Before he stopped, a shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. Then a silver spear instantly reached his throat. As fast as lightning. Yi Xian's expression was calm. Just as the spear was about to pierce his throat, his body suddenly leaned back and at the same time, the sword in his hand suddenly flew out. The sword brought with it a sword light that looked like a crescent moon. White Robe suddenly withdrew his spear and slammed it down. Boom. Yi Xian's sword was directly hit, and the powerful force sent the sword flying. Yi Xian himself took the opportunity to retreat 1,000 feet away. The moment he stopped, he stretched out his right hand, and the sword that was sent flying by the White Robe landed firmly in his palm. In the distance, the white-robed man stood with a spear in his hand. He was dressed in white robes and had a silver spear in his hand. He looked like a god of war. Shen Wu did not intervene. Whether it was him or White Robe, both of them had their own pride. As long as Yi Xian didn't play any dirty tricks, they wouldn't choose to gang up on Yi Xian. Arrogance. They had fought countless battles in their lives, so why would they fear Yi Xian? At this moment, White Robe suddenly took a step forward. With each step, he struck with his spear. The space in front of Yi Xian suddenly cracked open. Following that, a silver light flashed out. The spear arrived before the man. Yi Xian did not block it. Instead, he stabbed with his sword. This time he chose to fight head-on. Boom. The sword light shattered and Yi Xian retreated more than 10 feet. However, White Robe also retreated more than 300 feet with his spear. Yi Xian actually gained the upper hand in this head-on confrontation. Not far away, Bai Dizzy frowned slightly. How is this possible? At this moment, Zhen Wu suddenly said. His strength is different from before. Strength. Yi Xian's current strength was naturally different from before. He had absorbed the blood of the entire Naga Dragon clan. He now possessed the strength of the Naga Dragon clan. In terms of pure strength, perhaps only Jiaolu could compete with him. At this moment, Bai Dizzy's voice suddenly sounded in Zhen Wu's mind. When he fights with White Robe later, if you ambush him, how confident are you of killing him? Hearing this, Zhen Wu frowned slightly. He looked at Bai Dizzy. What do you mean? Bai Dizzy's face was extremely gloomy. Zhen Wu, I know you have your pride, but you have to know that this Yi Xian. Zhen Wu suddenly shook his head. Bai Dizzy, I know that in your heart you have always wanted Yi Xian to die. I also want him to die. However, I will not ambush him. Now it is a fair battle between him and White Robe. Bai Dizzy stared at Zhen Wu. Zhen Wu, don't be pedantic. I beg you. Zhen Wu looked at Yi Xian in the distance and said softly, it's not pedantic. It's the bottom line. Bai Dizzy still wanted to say something. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly rushed towards White Robe with his sword in hand. Bai Dizzy's face was extremely ugly. If Zhen Wu suddenly ambushed him, he had a high chance of killing Yi Xian. However, Zhen Wu was too pedantic. Bottom line? Bai Dizzy also wanted to have a bottom line. However, between the bottom line and Doubting's life and death, he chose the latter. As if he had thought of something, he suddenly looked at a Surgat on his right. At this moment, Zhen Wu's voice suddenly rang in his head. Bai Dizzy, I Doubting, am I ace or loser? Bai Dizzy looked at Zhen Wu. Zhen Wu said softly, even if we lose, let us lose with some dignity, okay? Bai Dizzy was silent. Zhen Wu said again, let them fight. If White Robe loses, I won't say anything if you choose to gang up on him. But now let them fight fairly. I believe that White Robe will choose the same. Bai Dizzy was still silent. Zhen Wu looked at Bai Dizzy. Doubting is my belief. I will fight for this belief until the end. I know that doubting is your belief too. However, we cannot throw away our bottom line for our belief. Bai Dizzy sighed softly. Zhen Wu did not say anything else. He looked into the distance. At this moment, Yi Xian and White Robe's battle was very intense. Actually, he was feeling rather emotional. Back when Yi Xian had just gone to Celestial Abyss, Yi Xian was not his match. But now Yi Xian's strength was no weaker than his and White Robe's. Yi Xian's growth was really too fast. Boom. At this moment, an explosion suddenly sounded. Under everyone's gaze, White Robe was forced back nearly 100 feet by Yi Xian's sword. White Robe had just stopped when he suddenly soared into the sky. The next moment he held the silver spear in his hand and threw it at Yi Xian. The spear was like a raging dragon emerging from the sea, piercing through heaven and earth. Below, Yi Xian's expression was calm. Before the spear reached him, the space around him was already distorted. The momentum of the spear was too strong. When the spear arrived above Yi Xian suddenly transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky. Bang! A world-shaking explosion suddenly resounded, and then the space in an area of over 100 kilometers cracked apart. In midair, Yi Xian held his sword firmly against the spear. The energy within the spear hadn't vanished completely. The glow on Yi Xian's sword was growing dimmer and dimmer. Right at this moment, White Robe suddenly appeared in the sky above the spear, and then he stomped his right foot against the tip of the spear. Bang! Yi Xian descended straight down from midair while the tip of the spear was constantly pressing against the tip of Yi Xian's sword. So White Robe's energy was ceaselessly suppressing Yi Xian. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot against the ground. In the next moment, the sword domain suddenly appeared here. At the same time, he swiftly slashed his sword forward. Bang! Yi Xian stopped. In the next moment, White Robe retreated explosively by 300 m. After White Robe stopped, he gazed at Yi Xian with eyes that were filled with battle intent. Fight! Yi Xian's eyes were filled with battle intent as well. Since he'd absorbed the dragon's blood and cultivated his body into the Dao body, he'd rarely fought. But now he wanted to fight to his heart's content. Yi Xian walked towards White Robe with his sword in hand. His blood started to surge within him. However, he didn't release the energy of his bloodline. Not only did he not release the energy of his bloodline, he didn't even expose his Dao body. White Robe gazed at Yi Xian from afar while he held the silver spear tightly in his right hand. The silver spear in his hand started to tremble violently, and a monstrous aura enveloped the surroundings. The aura of the spear was overwhelming. Right at this moment, Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. White Robe's face was expressionless as he suddenly stabbed the spear in his right hand forward. Bang! A ray of sword light was forced to stop by this spear strike. The space around White Robe and Xian transformed into nothingness at this moment, whereas White Robe and Xian separated from each other at this moment, and both of them retreated explosively by over 1 kilometer. As Xian was flying backwards, a flying sword suddenly slashed towards White Robe. White Robe stabbed forward in midair. Bang! The flying sword was blocked. However, in the next moment Xian suddenly appeared in front of the flying sword. He grabbed the sword and slashed forward with great force. When this strike descended, the expressions of everyone here changed drastically, including White Robe. Dao sword. This strike wasn't an ordinary sword technique any longer, but a Dao sword. It was also the first time Xian had executed a Dao sword since he'd cultivated the Dao sword. This strike shook the heavens and the earth. White Robe's eyes revealed a solemn expression for the first time as he stood before Xian. He held the spear with both hands and swiftly swept it horizontally, causing a strand of domineering spear energy to sweep out. But in the next moment, this spear energy was directly slashed into pieces by Xian's strike. Bang! Under the gazes of everyone, White Robe instantly retreated explosively by 3 kilometers, whereas the space in an area of 3 kilometers in front of Xian had been transformed into nothingness. This strike had forcefully obliterated this expanse of space. Nearby, a wisp of blood slowly seeped out from the corner of White Robe's mouth. Moreover, countless cracks had appeared on the silver spear in his hand. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. White Robe was at a complete disadvantage in this collision. In the distance, Xian walked slowly towards White Robe with his sword in hand. Meanwhile, a trace of viciousness flashed through White Robe's eyes, and then he suddenly leaped up. At this moment, his entire body became illusory, and the silver spear in his hand suddenly trembled violently. At a disadvantage, Xian suddenly leaped up and slashed with his sword. Dao sword. With this slash, the space around Xian instantly became illusory. Meanwhile, White Robe suddenly stabbed down with his spear. It was a tit for tat. Both of them had executed their strongest attacks. Bang! As soon as the spear and sword came into contact, the space in an area of over 100 kilometers around the southern gate was forcefully obliterated. On the other hand, Xian and White Robe retreated explosively, and they retreated for over 10 kilometers. As soon as Xian stopped, the space in an area of 3 kilometers behind him was instantly transformed into nothingness. Xian was first stunned and then he hurriedly fell to the ground. He held his chest with both hands as if he was about to die. Actually, he was completely fine because his body had forcefully withstood all the force of White Robe's attack. However, he didn't want to expose his Dao physique. In the distance, White Robe was quite heavily injured as well. However, he didn't fall and he stood there with his spear in hand. Meanwhile, White Robe suddenly charged towards Xian with his spear in hand. Obviously, he wanted to put an end to Xian right away. Now that Xian was heavily injured, it was the best time to kill him. Under everyone's gazes, Xian clutched his chest as blood flowed incessantly from his mouth, and he seemed to be on the verge of death. White Robe was getting closer and closer to Xian. Chapter 1402. Just as White Robe was several feet away from Xian, White Robe suddenly stopped. White Robe stared at Xian. "Stop pretending." Xian did not react and still looked like he was about to die. White Robe just stared at Xian. He did not choose to attack again. After a moment, seeing that White Robe did not attack, Xian sat up. He looked at White Robe and thought it was a pity. This guy actually did not fall for it. White Robe looked at Xian. "If you were really that weak, you would not have come to challenge me." Saying that, he slowly closed his eyes. "Xian, if you want to kill me, there is only one way, and that is to kill me openly." "You want to kill me? Then you might be thinking too much." Xian chuckled. "Then I will kill you openly." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly leaped up with his sword in hand, and then he swiftly slashed down. Dao sword. At the same time that the sword slashed down, a mysterious force suddenly enveloped White Robe. Sword domain. White Robe was expressionless as he stabbed out with his spear. Boom. Heaven and earth trembled. Under everyone's gaze, White Robe retreated rapidly. Not far away by Dizzy and the others did not look good. Because Xian could already suppress White Robe. He did not rely on battle techniques but purely on strength in that Dao sword. If it were anyone else they would definitely not be able to continuously use such a powerful sword technique, but Xian could. Because his fleshly body was really strong enough. The battle became more and more intense, and the blood in Xian's body gradually boiled. However, he was still suppressing his bloodline power. This bloodline power was too abnormal. Unless it was a desperate situation he would usually not use it. In the distance, Bai Dizzy suddenly looked at Zhenwu. He is getting stronger as he fights. Zhenwu was silent. He also realized this problem. Xian was getting stronger as he fought. In other words, Xian had just broken through. Right now Xian was using battle to stimulate his potential. Bai Dizzy said softly, "If this continues I don't know if White Robe will lose, but I do know that this Xian will become stronger and stronger. He might even reach the Dao manipulation realm." Obviously he still wanted Zhenwu to sneak up on Xian. Now that Xian was being forced by the white-robed man, as long as Zhenwu chose to launch a sneak attack, there was a great chance that he could kill Xian. In the field, only Zhenwu had a good chance to kill Xian. Zhenwu fell silent. Bai Dizzy sighed softly. "Zhenwu, I know you're proud, but have you ever thought that once this person reaches the Imperial Dao, even a Dao ancestor wouldn't be able to kill him so easily? You have to know that he has yet to unleash his full strength. Putting everything else aside, he has yet to use the power of his bloodline." What does this mean? It means that once he uses the power of his bloodline, White Robe will most likely lose. Zhenwu slowly closed his eyes. And the sword in his hand kept trembling. Bai Dizzy continued, "Zhenwu, if we don't get rid of Xian today, I doubting will be destroyed by this person in the future. Xian is a despicable person. There's no need for us to talk about fairness with him. Moreover, he is challenging you in White Robe. There's nothing wrong with you making a move." After a long silence, Zhenwu looked at Xian in the distance and said softly, "If I make a move it means that I, doubting, will lose the last bit of pride and dignity." Bai Dizzy was about to speak when Zhenwu suddenly said, "Bai Dizzy, do you know why the Great Dao collapsed all those years ago?" Bai Dizzy looked at Zhenwu. Zhenwu said softly, "Because we are unscrupulous. Our Dao court is unscrupulous in everything we do. It is because of Ru Chu that the world has appeared." Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Xian's position as crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. "Why?" At this time, a timid voice suddenly rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a hint of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, "Great Elder, my brother Xian is a crown prince. Why did you discard him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, why are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the Great Elder, but she did not leave. Instead she plucked up her courage and entered the ancestral hall. She bowed again to the elders on both sides. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is really unfair." "Impudent." The Great Elder suddenly raged. "Discard him or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this moment the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The Great Elder said coldly, "Then flog 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, even now he is fighting for the clan, but the clan is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang, and he knew that this was his chance to show off. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of crown prince. It's everyone's wish, why are you shouting?" As he said this, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Flap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen, but she did not cry and just covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "I'm Zhang Mu, greeting the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I need 10 guards so you can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. "I'm willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince, even if I have to die 10,000 times. Yi Lang nodded slightly. "Drag him out, this person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show mercy, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. Immediately he grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered and there was blood everywhere. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the South Mountain. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his expression was frighteningly gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed and he quickly looked at Yi Lang. Just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head and looked at him. "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. "Why?" At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, why are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." Impudent! The great elder suddenly raged. "Discard him or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, Then flock her 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he is risking his life for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry. She only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed deeply. "This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to see something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Zhou Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you?" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and snarled, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me." Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Chapter 1403. Behind Bai Dizzy stood a middle-aged man. It was the doubting Dao ancestor. Bai Dizzy said, "Dao ancestor Zhenwu." The Dao ancestor said, "This is his choice. Respect it." Bai Dizzy sighed. With Zhenwu's departure, the doubting's strength was greatly reduced. The Dao ancestor looked into the depths of the starry sky. "Did you find the plain-dressed woman?" Bai Dizzy said, "Divine Wind and the others have been found. But both of them are dead. It seems that the plain-dressed woman is stronger than we imagined." The Dao ancestor was silent. Bai Dizzy said, "Our top priority now is to deal with Moon Yen. She has lost her memory and has no strength. Now is the best time to kill her." Moon Yen. The Dao ancestor turned to look in the direction of the five-dimensional universe and said, "We should have destroyed her body and the five-dimensional universe." As for that woman, he was also afraid of her. It was that woman who had destroyed his body with less than 30% of her strength. 30% of her strength. He had to admit that he was a little shocked at that time. He was at the Dao attainment realm. Moreover, he was at the peak of the Dao attainment realm. However, that woman had easily destroyed his body with only 30% of her strength. In fact, during this period of seclusion he had been thinking about how strong that woman was. There was no answer. There was no path above the Dao attainment realm. At least for him there was no path. After a long time the Dao ancestor suddenly said, "Get ready. I will go find that person." With that he turned and left. In the field by Dizzy was silent for a long time, then said softly, Zhenwu, the doubting realm will become better. The order of the Great Path will also be restored. With that he turned and left. The Dao ancestor came to the Dao tomb. On a mountain peak the Dao ancestor came to a cave. The Dao ancestor looked at the cave and said, Senior brother, are you still in seclusion? The stone door of the cave suddenly opened and a middle-aged man walked out. Lord, the Lord of the Dao tomb. If there were outsiders here they would definitely be shocked. Because the Dao ancestor called him senior brother. In fact, very few people knew that the Lord was once a Dao Ting. However, he later parted ways with the Dao Ting. The Lord looked at the Dao ancestor and smiled. Junior brother, how have you been? The Dao ancestor was expressionless. Looks like you didn't break through again. The Lord laughed. It doesn't matter. The Dao ancestor smiled and said, Do you really not care? The Lord raised his head and looked deep into the starry sky. He smiled and said, Junior brother, during my seclusion I suddenly realized something. It's meaningless. The Dao ancestor frowned slightly. What's meaningless? The Lord laughed. Doubting battles with you are meaningless. The Dao ancestor looked at the Great Lord. What do you mean? The Lord laughed. How strong do you think Mu Nianyan is? The Dao ancestor was silent. Mu Nianyan. Just how strong was this woman? He didn't know. That woman's strength could be said to have exceeded his understanding. The Lord continued, Even if I subvert your doubting, what's the point? The 3,000 great Daoists are just ants to some people in this world. Then he looked at the Dao ancestor and smiled. I want to go to other places to see how big the universe is. I also want to see the strong from other places. What about you? The Dao ancestor was silent. The Lord laughed. I know that you want to kill Zhou Xian and that woman. Moreover, you want the Dao scriptures. Zhou Xian now has 5 scrolls, your Dao court has 2 and the Dao tomb has 1. If you get all of them you will have 8 Dao scriptures. However, the last one is in the Saga world. Can you get it? The Dao ancestor whispered, What if you get it? The Lord was silent. Dao scriptures. What did it mean to gather the Dao scriptures? It meant to awaken the Dao spirit. One had to say it was very tempting. The Dao ancestor looked at the Lord. Senior brother, aren't you tempted? The Lord laughed and didn't say anything. The Dao ancestor said, Senior brother, if we gather the Dao scriptures and awaken the Dao spirit, we will be able to reach the next level. The Lord was silent. The Dao ancestor said, Don't you want to see the complete version of the Dao scriptures? The Lord looked at the Dao ancestor. That Zhou Xian is not simple. The Dao ancestor smiled. His biggest support is that Mu Nianyan. That person has lost her memory. If we want to kill her it will be easy, isn't it? The Lord asked, What about the person behind him? The Dao ancestor was silent. Because until now the doubting still didn't know who was behind Zhou Xian. The Lord smiled and said, Let's not talk about the others. Let's talk about the woman in the plain dress. Junior brother, what level do you think she is? The Dao ancestor said, Senior brother, you have actually made a decision, right? The Lord smiled. What decision? The Dao ancestor looked at the Lord. You will not give up on the Dao scriptures. The Lord laughed. Junior brother, you have no choice because you have already become enemies with Zhou Xian. However, I have a choice because I have a good relationship with Zhou Xian in the Dao tomb. What do you think? The Dao ancestor smiled. Senior brother, you said that you want to leave. Where are you going? To the ancient god abyss? The Lord said, Can't I? The Dao ancestor looked at the Lord. Are you going there to rely on others? The Lord's smile slowly disappeared. The Dao ancestor smiled and said, Senior brother, at this level, you and I can be said to have reached our limits. Although we are all geniuses, the Dao attainment realm is our limit. Not to mention us wasn't master the same back then. To us, there is only one way to change our fate and reach the next level. That is to gather all the Dao scriptures and awaken the Dao spirit. What do you think? The Lord smiled. You want me to join forces with you? The Dao ancestor looked at the Lord. Yes. The Lord chuckled. Junior brother, do you know that greed can kill people? The Dao ancestor was expressionless. If we can't reach the next level, how long do you and I have to live? 10,000 years? 1,000 years? The Lord was silent. The Dao ancestor continued. One more thing. Senior brother, don't you want to know why Mu Nianyan is so strong? He doesn't have the complete Dao scripture but his wealth is above the Dao realm. I believe that you must be curious too, right? The Lord smiled. I am indeed curious. The Dao ancestor said, it's easy to figure it out. Just capture this person, right? The Lord did not speak. He slowly walked to the side of the cliff. No one knew what he was thinking. The Dao ancestor continued, Senior brother, you are worried about the person behind him. The Lord smiled. Shouldn't I be worried? The Dao ancestor said, everything has its risks. The Lord said softly, this is a little risky. The Dao ancestor was about to speak when the Lord said, as far as I know, Xian has an agreement with the Dao tomb. After he obtains the Dao scripture he will share it with the Dao tomb. The Dao ancestor's face darkened. Senior brother, do you really believe it? The Lord looked at the Dao ancestor. Why wouldn't I believe it? After Xian obtained the Dao scripture he was very generous. He shared the 5 Dao scriptures with the people around him. The Dao ancestor said, it's just to buy people's hearts. The Lord laughed. Buy people's hearts? Junior brother. You're still the same as before. You like to look at people with prejudice. Sometimes, is it so difficult to admit the excellence of others? The Dao ancestor was expressionless. The Lord said, Junior brother, I am different from you. You have no way out because if you don't kill Xian will destroy your doubting. As for me, I have no reason to be enemies with him. Why should I be enemies with him? My Dao tomb has already formed a good relationship with him. Why should I turn this good relationship into a bad one? Of course, I am also tempted by what you said. Gather all the Dao scriptures, awaken the spirit of the Dao and reach a higher level. However, even if I am tempted, there is no need for me to be enemies with Xian. Why? Because after Xian gathers all the Dao scriptures, I don't think there will be any problem with him sharing it. As he said this, he looked at the Dao ancestor and smiled. It might be difficult for you to share it. However, I don't think there will be any difficulty for Xian to share it. This person has a pure heart and values relationships. Most importantly, he doesn't care about the Dao scriptures. When he gathers all 8 scrolls, I will give him the one from my Dao tomb. I believe that it won't be difficult for him to share the complete version of the Dao scripture. What do you think? The Dao ancestor smiled. It seems that senior brother thinks that I, doubting, will definitely lose this battle. The Lord shook his head. That is not what I am concerned about. What I am concerned about is what choice I should make to maximize my benefits. As he said this, he looked at the sky and smiled. I will not help Xian fight you. Although he is worth befriending, I do not want to be involved in this whirlpool. After all, he is a person with the cause of disaster. It is better to stay away from him. Also, I will not help you fight him. You are an ingrate. It is better to help him than to help you. After all, Xian is a person who values relationships more than you. As he said this, he looked at the Dao ancestor and smiled. I will wait and see. The Dao ancestor smiled. What if I win? The Lord blinked. If you win, will you be able to gather all the Dao scriptures? Junior brother, don't forget that I also have the Dao scriptures. You win. If you want to gather all the Dao scriptures, you have to beg me. The Dao ancestor looked at the Lord and did not speak. The Lord smiled. For the sake of my dead master, I will give you a piece of advice. It is not scary to make mistakes, but it is scary to make mistakes again and again. Moon Yin has been resurrected. Xian's hatred for the doubting is not that great. Admit defeat and form a good relationship with the 5th dimension. I believe that it should not be a big problem. After all, Moon Yin is alive. For Xian, as long as Moon Yin is not dead, anything can be discussed. As for the Dao scriptures, if it is yours, then it is yours. If it is not, then don't force it. The Dao ancestor looked at the Lord and smiled. Senior brother, do you know why you lost to me? Without waiting for the Lord to answer, the Dao ancestor said, because I fight. I fight for everything. Since I have set foot on this path, I must fight. Watch carefully. This time I will fight with Xian. As he said this, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. On the mountain peak, the Lord was silent for a moment. Then he shook his head and smiled. Fight your sister. Chapter 1404. The 5-Dimensional Universe. Xian returned to the 5-Dimensional Universe. At this moment, his heart was extremely heavy. Lord True Marshal had reached the Dao Attainment Realm. This was one disaster after another for the 5-Dimensional Universe. He was also extremely depressed. How did that guy reach the Dao Attainment Realm? Could it be that his battle with White Robe inspired that guy? Thinking of this, Yi Xian could not help but shake his head and sigh. This trip to the doubting realm was a huge loss. Inside the hall, Yi Xian had just entered the sword hall when he saw Guan Yin. Beside Guan Yin was a man in black. It was Li Zue. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw Li Zue, then hurriedly said, "Senior Li Zue, you're back so soon?" Li Zue said solemnly, "I called 2 people both at the peak of the Dao attainment realm. However, they will need 30,000 fortune divine crystals for each attack. Is there a problem?" Yi Xian smiled. "No problem." What he lacked the least now were fortune divine crystals. Li Zue nodded slightly. "That's good. They are all in the dark. If you need them, they can attack at any time. Of course, if the 5-dimensional universe has no chance of winning, they will not fight to the death. They will choose to leave." Yi Xian nodded. Understood. After all, they were here to make money, not to fight to the death. Of course, he only needed them to help him hold back a few of the Doubting Realm's core powerhouses. Li Zue nodded and did not say anything else. He quietly left. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. Guan Yin smiled. Arrow Jiu and Lanxiu and Wenxiu have all come out. Yi Xian was about to speak when a woman walked in. It was Zhang Wenxiu. Seeing Zhang Wenxiu, Guan Yin smiled and retreated. She knew that Yi Xian and Zhang Wenxiu had a special relationship. Yi Xian looked at Zhang Wenxiu and smiled. "Congratulations." Zhang Wenxiu had reached the Dao validation realm. Zhang Wenxiu walked over to Yi Xian and sized up Yi Xian. "Let's spar." Yi Xian laughed and said, "You really want to beat me?" Zhang Wenxiu rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. She walked to the side and sat down. "Looks like I won't be able to defeat you." Yi Xian sat beside Zhang Wenxiu. "Wenxiu, how's the academy?" Zhang Wenxiu smiled and said, "It's getting better and better. The current academy is several times bigger than before. The headmaster of the academy only teaches every day. She is very relaxed." Yi Xian turned to look at Zhang Wenxiu. "What about you? What are your plans for the future?" Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian and did not say anything. Yi Xian blinked. "Did I say something wrong?" Zhang Wenxiu did not say anything. She stood up and left. Yi Xian quickly grabbed Zhang Wenxiu's hand. Zhang Wenxiu tried to break free, but Yi Xian's physical strength was too strong. He could not break free at all. Yi Xian asked softly, "What's wrong?" Zhang Wenxiu was expressionless and did not say anything. Yi Xian caressed Zhang Wenxiu's hand and said softly, "I know that I have neglected you these days. I, Yi Xian, am not a heartless person. But you also know that too many things have happened in the 5th dimension." Zhang Wenxiu did not say anything. She knew that ever since Moon Yanyan left, Yi Xian had shouldered too much. Now the safety of the entire 5th dimension was on Yi Xian's shoulders. Yi Xian said again, "If I am not wrong, Doubting might be risking his life." Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian. "What are your plans?" Yi Xian smiled. "What plans can I have? Of course I will fight them to the death." Zhang Wenxiu was silent. Yi Xian held Zhang Wenxiu's hand and said softly, "I can't promise you anything because I might die tomorrow." Zhang Wenxiu shook her head. "I don't need you to promise me anything." Yi Xian smiled. "If we live together. If we die together. What I owe you in this life I will repay you in my next life." Zhang Wenxiu said calmly, "If you lose, will Doubting let you have a next life?" Yi Xian laughed. "That's true. They will definitely annihilate my soul." Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian with a complicated look in her eyes. "You have matured a lot." She still remembered the Yi Xian of the past. At that time Yi Xian was sloppy and not serious at all. But now Yi Xian was the master of the 5th dimension. As if she thought of something, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly grabbed Yi Xian's hand. "Do you know? I have been a little worried these days. I am not worried about Doubting but worried about you. I am worried that you are walking too fast." Yi Xian blinked. "I am walking too fast?" Zhang Wenxiu nodded. "You are walking too fast. So fast that I can't keep up with you." Yi Xian fell silent. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian. "It is not just me. They all have this worry." Yi Xian smiled. "I have to walk fast." Zhang Wenxiu nodded. "I understand." Yi Xian took out a storage ring and placed it in Zhang Wenxiu's hand. "There are 1,000,000 fortune divine crystals and some treasures that you can use." Zhang Wenxiu did not refuse. She put away the storage ring and said, "If there is anything, we will all bear it together. Don't bear it alone, understand?" Yi Xian nodded. "Okay." Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian. Even if we die, we will die together. Of course, it is best if we can live. After all, you still owe me so much. Yi Xian held Zhang Wenxiu's hand tightly and smiled. I will repay what I owe you in this lifetime. Zhang Wenxiu suddenly threw herself into Yi Xian's arms. She closed her eyes and shook her head. Men smell so bad. Then she turned and left. Inside the hall, Yi Xian was silent. At this time, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in the hall. The person who had come was the High Lord. Yi Xian looked at the Lord. Senior, are you the Lord of the Dao Tomb? The Lord smiled. How did you guess? Yi Xian said, there is only one Dao ancestor that can make me feel threatened. The other one is the Lord. The Lord laughed. Yi Xian, there is more than one Dao ancestor in the doubting realm. Yi Xian smiled. I was just guessing, but it seems like I was right. Looking at Yi Xian, the Lord said, I am here to talk about cooperation with you. Yi Xian said, Senior, please speak. The Lord laughed and said, you are a straightforward person, so I won't beat around the bush. What I mean is simple. This time the Dao Tomb will not interfere in the matter between you and the doubting. Yi Xian said, Senior, please continue. The Lord continued. If you can gather all 8 Dao scriptures, I will give you the one in the Dao Tomb. You can summon the Dao spirit. But in return, I want to see the complete Dao scripture. Is there a problem? Yi Xian smiled. Senior, I have discussed this with Senior Rahu. We have reached an agreement. The Lord looked at Yi Xian. I just want to confirm. Yi Xian said, Senior, don't worry. If I can gather all 9 Dao scriptures, I will let you have a look. The Lord smiled. Thank you. He turned to leave. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Sir, can we talk about something else? The Lord turned to Yi Xian. You are trying to trick me. Yi Xian was speechless. The Lord smiled. Although I know you are trying to trick me, I am willing to listen to you. Consider it as giving you face. After all, I still have to give you face. Yi Xian looked at the Lord. Senior, I want to borrow a few people from you. The Lord blinked. I said, the Dao Tomb will not interfere. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, Sister Nian has reached the Dao realm. The Lord's smile froze. Yi Xian said, Sister Nian and I are very close. He looked at the Lord. Senior, do you want to make a bet? The Lord was silent. He knew what Yi Xian meant. If Yi Xian won and Mu Nianyan regained his memory, he could ask Mu Nianyan for guidance. If he could ask Mu Nianyan for guidance, the complete Dao scripture would be nothing. Why would Mu Nianyan teach him? It was simple. Yi Xian. If Yi Xian spoke up for him, it would be simple. Who didn't know the relationship between Yi Xian and Mu Nianyan? A moment later, the Lord suddenly said, I will give you 6 Dao Defense Peak Stage powerhouses. I have secretly trained these 6 people. Even Luo Ho doesn't know of their existence. Their strength is second only to Luo Ho and the Heavenly King. Then 6 black-robed people appeared behind him. All 6 of them were Dao Defense Peak Stage powerhouses. The Lord looked at Yi Xian. Now the 6 of them will listen to your orders. Yi Xian said, thank you. The Lord suddenly laughed. Can you tell me the truth? Yi Xian said with a smile, what do you mean? The Lord smiled. For example, your true background. And the people behind you. Yi Xian shook his head. Senior, you won't believe me even if I tell you. The Lord smiled. How can I believe you if you don't tell me? Yi Xian thought for a moment. Actually, I am the son of the plane of the 9-dimensional universe. The Lord blinked. Scram. Then he turned and disappeared. Inside the palace, Yi Xian shook his head. His own background? In fact, he didn't even know. Yi Xian gazed at the 6 of them and then he pointed with his finger. 6 spatial rings descended before them, and every single one of them contained 100,000 divine fortune crystals. The 6 of them glanced at the spatial rings. Meanwhile, one of the black-robed figures hesitated for a moment before he said, Young Master Yi, you're too kind. Yi Xian smiled. The battle with the doubting is of utmost importance to the 5-dimensional universe. I hope that all of you can help me when the time comes. If I, Yi Xian, am able to survive, then I, Yi Xian, will definitely reward all of you handsomely. The black-robed figure in the lead put the spatial rings away. We'll do our best. Yi Xian nodded. Thank you. All of you hide yourselves for now. I'll ask all of you to lend a hand when the time comes. The 6 of them nodded and then they vanished without a trace. Yi Xian walked out of the palace and he looked up into the depths of the starry sky. No one knew what he was thinking. Meanwhile, Nian Nian suddenly appeared by Yi Xian's side. She took Yi Xian's hand and said softly, "I still can't remember anything." She'd been trying hard to recall the past but she couldn't. Yi Xian withdrew his gaze, looked at Nian Nian and smiled. "If you can't remember then don't think about it. This time I'll protect you." Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian continued. "Just like how you protected me last time." Nian Nian looked up at Yi Xian. "What if you can't win?" Yi Xian smiled. "Then I'll die with Nian Nian. This time if we live then we'll live together. If we die then we'll die together." Ancient God Abyss. An old man stood silently at the top of a pyramid. He looked up into the depths of the starry sky, and his eyes were filled with confusion. This person was Zhou Xian. Ever since he'd met the woman in the plain dress, he'd been deeply affected. He'd already achieved the Tao. Originally, he'd thought that he was already standing at the peak of martial arts in this world. However, the appearance of the woman in the plain dress made him understand that he hadn't reached the peak at all. In fact, he was still a long way from the true peak. That woman was so strong that it made people feel hopeless. How could there be such a powerful person in this world? At this moment an old man suddenly appeared beside Zhou Xian. This person was Su Ku, who'd come into contact with Yi Xian in the depths of the dark world. Zhou Xian withdrew his gaze. "How's the investigation going?" Su Ku said in a low voice. "It's clear. The young man I met in the dark world is the brother of the woman in the plain dress." In fact, he didn't know the woman in the plain dress. When she came to the ancient God Abyss, he wasn't there. When he returned to the ancient God Abyss and heard about the woman in the plain dress, he felt a lingering fear. Because he'd met Yi Xian. At that time he'd almost attacked Yi Xian. Every time he thought about it he felt a lingering fear. That mysterious woman had almost destroyed the ancient God Abyss. After the lingering fear he rejoiced. This was because he'd formed a good relationship with Yi Xian. At this time Zhou Xian asked, "That young man is in the fifth dimension?" Su Ku nodded. "Yes. However, his current situation doesn't seem to be good." Zhou Xian looked at Su Ku. "What do you mean?" Su Ku said in a low voice. "According to what I know, that Doubting wants to attack him." Zhou Xian was stunned. "Doubting wants to attack him?" Su Ku nodded. "Young Master Yi has 5 Tao scriptures. Moreover, he seems to have a blood feud with Doubting. Now that Doubting Tao ancestor has come out, he's about to attack the 5th dimension." Zhou Xian said softly, "This Doubting. His strength isn't that great but his guts are really big." As he said this he looked at Zhou Xian. "Don't they know how strong that senior is?" Su Ku said in a low voice. "According to my investigation they've investigated that senior. The 2 people that senior killed were from Doubting." Zhou Xian frowned. "Then why do they still dare to cause trouble for young Master Yi?" Su Ku smiled bitterly. "That senior only used one sword to kill them. Therefore they don't know her true strength. They might have misunderstood her strength." Zhou Xian was silent. That senior only used one sword to kill, but Doubting didn't know that she only used one sword to kill Tao Realm cultivators. Forget about Tao Realm cultivators, even if he was in front of her he wouldn't be able to withstand one sword. Su Ku suddenly asked, "Should we help?" Zhou Xian smiled. "Of course we should help. That senior values this young Master Yi so much. If we can form a good relationship with this young Master Yi, it'll be the same as forming a good relationship with that senior." As he said this he paused and then said, "That senior might be training this young Master Yi. Therefore we shouldn't rush to intervene. If young Master Yi is in danger, it won't be too late for us to intervene." Su Ku nodded. "All right. I'll go to the 5th dimension now." Zhou Xian suddenly said, "Bring some people with you." Su Ku looked at Zhou Xian. "How many people?" Zhou Xian thought for a moment and said, "Just in case, bring 10 Tao Realm cultivators with you. If there are any changes inform me immediately. P.S. Are there any tycoons among my readers? If there are, can you share how you got rich? I'm about to go to the sea. Chapter 1405. In the 5th dimension. On this day somewhere in the 5th dimension the starry sky suddenly split open. Then a middle-aged man walked out. Tao Ancestor. The moment the Tao Ancestor appeared in the starry sky of the 5th dimension, all living beings in the 5th dimension felt a formless power. A Tao Realm expert. Behind the Tao Ancestor were Bai Dizzy and the others. Almost all the doubting experts were here. The Tao Ancestor suddenly said, "Set up the array." As soon as he said that, 7 godly lords suddenly appeared in 7 different directions. The next moment, the constellations moved and a huge starlight array covered the entire starry sky. 7 stars divine array. In the depths of the starry sky, the power of countless stars continuously gathered towards this array. This was the most powerful array of the doubting experts. It could borrow the power of thousands of stars. At this moment, Xian suddenly appeared in front of the Dao ancestor. The Dao ancestor looked at Xian. Aren't you the young master of the whirling sect? Now you can call the experts of the whirling sect to save you. Or you can call the woman in the plain dress behind you. Xian nodded. Okay. After saying that, he took out the Qingkun gourd. Immortal gourd, call some people over. There was no response. Xian said in a deep voice, Immortal gourd, don't play dead. Call some people over to help. At this moment, Immortal gourd suddenly said, Kid, I can call people over. I really can. However, if the people I call over know that you have so many Dao scriptures, Xian threw Immortal gourd into the world prison pagoda. As if thinking of something, Xian spread out his hands and the blood in his body started to tremble. Bloodline power. Seeing this scene, the Dao ancestor's expression changed subtly. Xian's bloodline had always been a mystery. Who was this guy's son? At this moment, Xian suddenly raised his head and roared, Ancestor summoning. Ancestor summoning. Everyone, the doubting and the other experts' expressions were extremely strange. This guy wanted to summon his ancestor? The Dao ancestor's expression gradually turned solemn. He did not dare to underestimate Xian's bloodline. As soon as Xian's voice fell, a blood-red light suddenly shot up from his body. In an instant, the entire starry sky turned blood-red. It was extremely terrifying. The expressions of the experts from the Dao Palace turned solemn when they witnessed this scene. Looked a little scary. When Xian shouted ancestral summoning, in a distant part of the starry sky, a man in green suddenly stopped. He turned his head and frowned. What is he doing? Beside the azure-robed man, a spear-wielding woman asked, What's wrong? The blue-clothed man had a strange expression. He's summoning his ancestor. The woman, the azure-clothed man, shook his head. You even summoned your ancestor. He wants to ascend to the heavens. The woman said, Maybe he ran into some trouble. The green-robed man pulled the woman's hand and walked away. Ignore him. The woman was about to speak when the azure-clothed man suddenly stopped. He turned his head and frowned. There was killing intent in his eyes. The woman asked, What's wrong? The azure-clothed man said, Xianxia is in trouble. The woman was about to speak when the azure-clothed man said, Wait for me. I'll be back soon. With that, he disappeared on the spot. The woman, at the side, the horned little girl suddenly said, The daughter is her biological daughter. The son must have been picked up. In the 5-dimensional universe, Xian looked at the starry sky without any reaction. Xian frowned. He tried again, but there was still no response. Xian's expression darkened. Damn it. Summoning his ancestor didn't work. This was a little awkward. At this moment, the Dao ancestor suddenly said, Xian, I'll give you a chance to live. Are you leaving? Xian looked at the Dao ancestor. Dao ancestor, why are you still saying such nonsense to me at a time like this? Are you retarded? The Dao ancestor was about to speak when Xian suddenly said, Jialu. As soon as he finished speaking, a black shadow flashed out of Xian's body. In the next moment, a huge dragon that was tens of thousands of meters long appeared in the starry sky. Jialu. At this moment, Jialu had already cultivated a Dao body. When he saw Jialu, the Dao ancestor's expression changed. He looked at Xian. Jialu, you. Xian looked at Jialu. Hold him back. In the sky, Jialu dove directly towards the Dao ancestor. This charge caused the starry sky to tremble as if it was about to shatter. It was extremely shocking. When they saw this scene, the expressions of the doubting experts changed. This pressure was not weaker than the Dao ancestors at all. A trace of hostility flashed in the Dao ancestor's eyes. He lightly stomped his right foot and shot into the sky. In the sky, he punched out. This punch caused the entire starry sky to become illusory. Boom. The entire starry sky suddenly trembled violently. Then Jialu was blasted back. However, her strong body had withstood all the power of the Dao ancestor's punch. After forcing Jialu back with a punch, The Dao ancestor turned to look at Bai Dizzy. Kill. Leave no one alive. With that he turned and rushed towards Jiao Lu again. Below, Bai Dizzy suddenly said, "Get out of the formation." As soon as he finished speaking, the 7-star god formation suddenly trembled violently. In the next moment the energy of countless stars converged to form a huge blade, and the space around the huge blade instantly became illusory as soon as it appeared. This huge blade contained endless power of the stars. In the sky, Bai Dizzy suddenly roared, "Kill!" The 7 divine lords pointed at Yi Xian below as soon as they finished speaking. The huge blade of stars tore through the sky from the center of the formation. Wherever the blade passed, space was directly torn and shattered. Yi Xian had to receive this attack. If he did not, the huge blade of stars would enter the 5th dimension and destroy the 5th dimension's origin. However, Yi Xian did not dodge and allowed the huge blade of stars to slash into his body. Boom! Under everyone's gaze, the huge blade of stars was directly absorbed by Yi Xian. Yi Xian's aura skyrocketed. Seeing this scene, all the experts on the doubting stage were stunned. Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian in disbelief and said with a trembling voice, "You can even absorb the power of the stars." With that he roared like a madman, "Yi Xian! Ah! Is there anything that you can't absorb?" At that moment Bai Dizzy was indeed very aggrieved. Yi Xian could absorb sword qi, turbid qi and death qi. But now Yi Xian could even absorb the power of the stars. Was this guy a black hole? He could absorb anything. Below, Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath, an intoxicated expression on his face. After absorbing the power of the stars, he felt that his cultivation level had improved a lot. It was really a great supplement. Yi Xian looked at Bai Dizzy, cupped his fists and said with a smile, "Thank you." Hearing this, Bai Dizzy's face twitched. This was killing people. Yi Xian looked up at Jiao Lu and the Dao ancestor. Jiao Lu had already been suppressed by the Dao ancestor. Obviously, Jiao Lu's strength was inferior to the Dao ancestors. However, with Jiao Lu's powerful physical body, the Dao ancestor could not do anything to her for a while. Yi Xian withdrew his gaze and looked at White Robe. Little 7. As his voice fell, a sword light suddenly broke through the air from afar. Not far away, White Robe frowned slightly. He suddenly turned his head and stabbed out with his spear. Bang! White Robe was blasted over 100 m back. White Robe stared fixedly at Little 7 who had appeared in front of him. "You've become stronger again." He'd fought Little 7 the last time, and Little 7 wasn't so strong at that time. Little 7 didn't waste his breath at all. He charged at White Robe with his sword in hand. White Robe stomped his right foot on the ground and then he vanished on the spot. In an instant, numerous sounds of slicing resounded. After White Robe was stopped, Yi Xian looked at Bai Dizzy and the others. Bai Dizzy was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly waved his right hand. In an instant, over 100,000 energy swords appeared around him. The expressions of Bai Dizzy and the others changed drastically when they witnessed this scene. Yi Xian suddenly pressed his fingers together and pointed forward. Flash. As soon as he finished speaking, over 100,000 energy swords tore through the air, and it was an extremely magnificent sight. Right at this moment, a white-haired old man suddenly appeared in front of Bai Dizzy and the others. The white-haired old man opened his palm, and a white square mirror appeared in his hand. In the next moment, a strand of dazzling white light suddenly erupted from the mirror. Bang! Yi Xian's foul energy was completely obstructed by the white light, and it was gradually dispersed. Yi Xian frowned when he witnessed this scene. What sort of mirror is that? It's actually able to disperse my foul energy. However, the white mirror in the white-haired old man's hand was slowly becoming illusory as well. Yi Xian didn't retract his foul energy because he noticed that the white-haired old man's mirror was on the verge of vanishing. Right at this moment, the white-haired old man suddenly put the mirror away, and then he transformed into an afterimage that shot explosively towards Yi Xian. His body tore through space, and the space in an area of over 3 kilometers was even split apart into spiderwebs by the white-haired old man's body. It was an extremely shocking sight. Moreover, the foul energy hadn't even approached the white-haired old man when it was blasted away by a powerful force. Yi Xian's expression instantly became solemn when he witnessed this scene. A Dao Attainment Realm expert. The white-haired old man was actually an expert at the Dao Attainment Realm. Meanwhile, the white-haired old man had arrived in front of Yi Xian, and then he smashed his fist forward. This punch was very simple, yet it contained an extremely overbearing and violent force. This violent force seemed as if it could destroy the entire fifth dimension, and it was extremely terrifying. At the instant that the white-haired old man struck out with his fist, some of the foul energy in the space around Zhou Xian was instantly transformed into nothingness. It wasn't just the foul energy, even the space around Zhou Xian was shattered and obliterated at this moment. The might of this punch was sufficient to shatter the heavens and the earth. Zhou Xian didn't dodge. He was unable to dodge this punch, so he could only take it head-on. Zhou Xian took a step forward, drew his sword and slashed. Dao sword. His sword slashed out and sword light shot out like a waterfall. Rumble. An expanse of sword light shattered, and Zhou Xian instantly retreated explosively by over 1 kilometer. As soon as he stopped, the space behind him had been transformed into nothingness. Zhou Xian gazed at the white-haired old man with a solemn expression. This old man was much stronger than the white-robed old man in Zhenwu. The white-haired old man glanced at Zhou Xian, then turned his head to look at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy understood and looked down at the fifth dimension. Kill. As soon as his voice fell, the doubting experts behind him rushed toward the fifth dimension. This time they didn't just want to kill Zhou Xian but also the entire fifth dimension. As long as the fifth dimension was not destroyed, Moon Yin wouldn't die. Therefore they had to destroy the entire fifth dimension to avoid any future troubles. At this moment, sword cries suddenly resounded from below, and the next moment hundreds of sword lights collided from below. Sword sect. More than 300 swordsmen directly rushed into the starry sky. Although the doubting experts had a higher realm than the swordsmen from the sword sect, these swordsmen didn't have the slightest bit of fear in their eyes. Fight. In the eyes of all the swordsmen, there was only fighting spirit. Senior Sister Lu, who was in the lead, pointed her sword at the doubting experts. Fight to the last man. Kill. As soon as her voice fell, she directly turned into a sword light and rushed out. Hundreds of swordsmen attacked at the same time. In an instant, sword chi swept across the entire starry sky with terrifying momentum. Bai Dizzy was expressionless. Courting death. These swordsmen's battle prowess wasn't bad, but the difference between their realms and the doubting experts was too big. One had to know that the weakest doubting experts were Dao validation experts. Moreover, the majority of doubting experts were Dao defense experts. What was important was that these people had all stayed in the celestial abyss before, so their combat experience was quite rich. If these swordsmen were all Dao validation experts, perhaps there would be a fight. Unfortunately, these swordsmen were mostly self-release experts. At this moment, 6 mysterious experts suddenly rushed toward Bai Dizzy and the others. They were the 6 people that the Lord had given to Zhou Xian. Apart from them, there were also Li Zhua and the other 2. All 3 of them were at the peak of Dao defense. 9 Super Dao Defense Realm experts. Seeing these 9 people, Bai Dizzy's expression changed subtly. However, these 9 people wouldn't be able to change the outcome of the battle. At this moment, Zhou Xian, who was not far away, suddenly opened his palm. The next moment 12 black shadows flew out from his palm. Then 12 enormous Naga dragon souls appeared in the starry sky. As soon as the 12 Naga dragon souls appeared, Bai Dizzy's expression changed. It wasn't just Bai Dizzy, the white-haired old man who stood before Zhou Xian frowned as well. These 12 Naga dragon souls were over 10 kilometers tall, and they emanated extremely powerful dragon energy. Even though they were only dragon souls, their auras were extremely powerful, and they were merely inferior to the 2 Dao Attainment Realm experts in Jialu. The white-haired old man stared fixedly at Zhou Xian. What's your relationship with the Naga dragons? Zhou Xian looked at the white-haired old man and smiled. Take a guess. The white-haired old man didn't speak. Zhou Xian is becoming more and more mysterious. Suddenly, the 12 Naga dragon souls swooped down towards Dao Ting and the other experts. The 12 Naga dragon souls swooped down in unison as if they intended to crush this expanse of the starry sky. At this moment, the entire starry sky trembled as if it was on the verge of collapse. It was an extremely shocking sight. Zhou Xian was slightly shocked as well because he hadn't expected the Naga dragon souls to be so strong. The 12 Naga dragon souls were sufficient to resist a few dozen Dao Attainment Realm experts. At the same time, Xianxia and the others had arrived. Xianxia Arrow, Jiu Situ Zhangwenxiu Lian Wanli, and the others had attained the Dao Validation Realm. Even though they were only at the Dao Validation Realm, They didn't feel any pressure when resisting Dao Attainment Realm experts. Bai Dizzy's face instantly fell when he witnessed this scene. The overall strength of the fifth dimension was still inferior to Doubting, but it wasn't as weak as Doubting thought either. The current fifth dimension was completely capable of fighting Doubting. As if he'd thought of something, Bai Dizzy suddenly turned to look at the white-haired old man in the distance. "Elder me, kill Yi Xian first." The white-haired old man looked at Yi Xian, and then he slowly clenched his right hand. At this moment, the space around him instantly became illusory. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes, and a powerful strand of killing intent gradually spread out from within him. Meanwhile, the white-haired old man suddenly vanished on the spot. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes and they were completely blood-red. Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously, "Kill!" As soon as he finished speaking, he slashed down with his sword. This strike wasn't just a Dao sword, it also contained killing intent. An expanse of blood-red light suddenly erupted in front of him. In an instant, Yi Xian retreated explosively by over 1 kilometer, and he just stopped when the white-haired old man suddenly appeared in front of him. After that, the white-haired old man smashed his fist towards Yi Xian's stomach. This punch could destroy the heavens and the earth. However, at this moment, Yi Xian actually didn't dodge at all and allowed the punch to strike his chest. Bang! Yi Xian's figure was blasted flying, but at the instant he flew, a sword stabbed into the white-haired old man's left shoulder. Soul-suppressing sword. Bang! A powerful soul force directly enveloped the white-haired old man, causing his expression to change drastically. His reaction was extremely fast, and his right hand abruptly pulled out the soul-suppressing sword. At the same time, his entire figure retreated hundreds of meters. After stopping, the white-haired old man's body turned illusory, and his entire person was extremely abnormal. However, his soul gradually returned to normal. After all, he was a Dao Attainment Realm expert, so it was impossible for his soul to be shattered by a single slash from the soul-suppressing sword. After the white-haired old man's soul calmed down, he lifted his head to look at Yi Xian in the distance. There was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. In that instant just now, he'd almost fallen for Yi Xian's Dao. If he hadn't reacted fast enough, his soul would have been severely injured. Other than that, he'd also noticed something else, and that was Yi Xian's physical body. Yi Xian had forcefully taken a punch from him, but Yi Xian was still standing normally. The white-haired old man unwaveringly stared at Yi Xian. "Your physical body is unexpectedly strong to this extent." In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. In his heart he felt that it was a pity. That sword just now had almost seriously injured the old man's soul. He'd still underestimated a Dao realm expert. Yi Xian opened his eyes and looked around. At this moment, the experts of the fifth dimension and the doubting experts were already in full swing. Because of the 12 Naga dragon souls, the fifth dimension side was not too disadvantaged. However, the situation was not good for the fifth dimension because Jialu couldn't beat the Dao ancestor. At this moment, Jialu was completely suppressed. If it weren't for her physical body being too strong, she would have already been killed. At this moment, the Dao ancestor suddenly punched Jialu. He didn't follow up with another attack. Instead, he looked down at Yi Xian and said fiercely, "Yi Xian, today you and that Moon Yin must die. No one can protect the two of you." As his voice faded, he opened his palm and roared, "Great Dao Restoration." As his voice faded, the starlight in the entire starry sky was annihilated. On the other side, the white-haired old man slowly clenched his right hand, and a powerful fist force locked onto Yi Xian. It should be said that the entire starry sky was enveloped by this fist force. Fist Dao. Obviously, the two of them wanted to join forces to kill Yi Xian first. As long as they killed Yi Xian, the entire fifth dimension would instantly collapse. How terrifying would it be if two Dao realm experts joined forces? At this moment in the starry sky, the Dao ancestor suddenly slapped down with his palm. A palm print swept down from the starry sky. Boom. The entire starry sky trembled as if there was a huge earthquake. In front of Yi Xian, the white-haired old man suddenly took a step forward and punched out. Boom. A fist print that could destroy heaven and earth headed straight for Yi Xian. Wherever the fist print passed, the starry sky was destroyed. Chapter 1406. In the starry sky, Yi Xian was like a floating page in the ocean in front of these two forces. He seemed so frail. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression was surprisingly calm. Could he beat them? He definitely couldn't. Yi Xian could at most fight one Dao Attainment Realm expert. He definitely couldn't fight two Dao Attainment Realm experts working together. After all, he was only at the Dao Validation Realm. Even with a Dao body, he couldn't beat two Dao Attainment Realm experts. But he couldn't retreat. Yi Xian wasn't a pedantic person. In the past, he would have chosen to flee if he couldn't beat them. But at this moment, he had no way out. Because the five-dimensional universe was behind him. His family and friends were behind him. Nian Yan was behind him. If he retreated, everyone would die. Since he couldn't retreat, he could only fight. He had to fight even if he couldn't beat them. At this point, the blood in Yi Xian's body suddenly trembled. Gradually, powerful bloodline power surged out of his body. Killing intent and bloodline power. The executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand became a sword spirit. Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward and slashed with his sword. Dao sword. A Dao sword that was enhanced by killing intent and bloodline power. The power of this sword shook the starry sky. Bang. As soon as Yi Xian slashed with his sword, a blood-colored sword light suddenly exploded in front of him. In an instant, Yi Xian retreated thousands of meters. Although he was strong, he couldn't resist the power of two Dao Attainment Realm experts. In the sky, the Dao ancestor was about to attack again when Jiao Lu slammed into him. A trace of viciousness flashed in the Dao ancestor's eyes as he punched. Bang! Jiao Lu was sent flying by the punch, and many parts of her body had already begun to slowly crack. After sending Jiao Lu flying, the Dao ancestor looked down at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian slowly stood up. Although he hadn't fought with his life on the line, his powerful body had held on. Although he was injured, it wasn't fatal. The Dao ancestor looked down at Yi Xian, his eyes cold. Overconfident ant. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slapped his palm forward, and the space in front of Yi Xian directly shattered layer by layer. Yi Xian suddenly leaped up and slashed forward with his sword in both hands. Boom. With a slash, the space in front of Yi Xian was slashed into nothingness. At this time, the Dao ancestor suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. He pointed a finger at Yi Xian. This finger directly touched the tip of Yi Xian's sword. Boom. Yi Xian flew out instantly, but the Dao ancestor's entire arm also cracked at this moment. The Dao ancestor frowned slightly when he saw that. He looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand in the distance with a grim look in his eyes. This sword was actually able to injure him. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, the white-haired old man suddenly appeared behind him, and the white-haired old man directly punched at Yi Xian's head. If this punch hit, even if Yi Xian had a Dao body, he would probably be seriously injured. Both the white-haired old man and the Dao ancestor didn't hold back at all. Their goal was to kill Yi Xian. Yi Xian's reaction was extremely fast. At the instant the old man punched, he suddenly turned around and blocked with his sword. Boom. Yi Xian's entire body directly retreated thousands of meters away. And before he could stop, the Dao ancestor appeared in front of him again. Yi Xian's pupils suddenly constricted and he slashed with his sword. Boom. A wave of blood-red sword light suddenly exploded, and Yi Xian was sent flying again. As soon as he was sent flying, the ancestral lord suddenly approached him and threw a punch at Yi Xian's face. Although it was just a simple punch, this punch was even more powerful than some divine skills. At the level of experts like the Dao ancestor, every punch and finger contained their own Dao, which was not something that some divine skills and martial skills could compare to. Seeing this punch coming, Yi Xian didn't dodge and let the Dao ancestor's punch hit his body. However, at this moment his sword also slashed on the Dao ancestor's head. Boom. The sword light shattered and Yi Xian flew out again. This time he flew thousands of meters away. And the Dao ancestor forcibly withstood Yi Xian's sword. This was because a golden light had appeared around him, and it was this golden light that had withstood Yi Xian's sword just now. The Dao ancestor looked coldly at Yi Xian in the distance. Do you think you're the only one who has a life-saving method? Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly leaped up and then he suddenly slashed his sword down towards the Dao ancestor. The moment he struck with his sword, the white-haired old man not far away suddenly disappeared. Immediately after, a fist mark appeared behind Yi Xian. However, at this moment, a woman appeared behind Yi Xian. Xianxia suddenly stabbed her spear forward. Bang! Xianxia was blasted 3 kilometers back, and as soon as she stopped moving, a wisp of blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth. She hadn't cultivated a Dao body, so she was utterly unable to endure the strength of an expert at the Dao realm. On the other hand, Yi Xian's sword slashed towards the Dao ancestor in the distance, but it was stopped by the Dao ancestor as well. Even though his Dao sword was formidable, it was too difficult to kill a Dao ancestor. Meanwhile, Xianxia retreated to Yi Xian's side and she spoke in a low voice. Are you all right? Even though Yi Xian's bloodline had been activated, he hadn't gone completely berserk. Even though his strength would increase explosively after going completely berserk, he wouldn't recognize anyone in that state. So he didn't dare allow himself to go completely berserk. Yi Xian wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth. I can still fight. Xianxia gazed at the white-haired old man. I'll stop him for you. As soon as she finished speaking, she was about to attack. However, Yi Xian suddenly grabbed her hand. Xianxia gazed at Yi Xian and Yi Xian shook his head. No. Xianxia didn't possess a Dao body, so she was utterly unable to endure the white-haired old man's strength. Just that strike from before had already heavily injured Xianxia. Xianxia was just about to speak when the Dao ancestor suddenly vanished on the spot. After that, a formidable force swept towards Yi Xian and Xianxia. On the other side, the white-haired old man had suddenly vanished on the spot as well. The space behind Yi Xian and Xianxia suddenly collapsed layer by layer. Xianxia suddenly turned around. She didn't retreat but advanced instead, and she charged forward and stabbed her spear forward. The spear was like a dragon that pierced through the heavens and the earth. Meanwhile, a fist smashed directly onto Xianxia's spear. Bang! The spear shook violently while Xianxia instantly retreated explosively. During the process of her retreat, her entire body suddenly became ethereal. In the next moment, she suddenly smashed her fist forward. As soon as her fist shot forward, countless afterimages suddenly appeared here, and all of these afterimages punched out at the same time. The white-haired old man who intended to follow up with another attack had suddenly stopped, and then he smashed his fist forward. Bang! The afterimages that covered the sky instantly vanished, and at this moment, a spear tore through the sky towards them. The white-haired old man frowned slightly as he punched once more, and the might of this punch was peerlessly domineering. Bang! The spear shattered into pieces, and Xianxia instantly retreated 3 kilometers away. The white-haired old man was just about to attack again when Jiaolu suddenly appeared in front of Xianxia. She glanced at Xianxia and said, "Let's attack together." As soon as she finished speaking, she charged directly towards the white-haired old man. Xianxia stomped her right foot and transformed into a streak of white light that shot towards Bai. The white-haired old man charged forward. Meanwhile, Yi Xian had already started fighting with that Dao ancestor. Yi Xian was still suppressed, but without the help of the white-haired old man, the Dao ancestor could only suppress Yi Xian. Because Yi Xian's body was too strong. Moreover, Yi Xian had 4 domains. With the help of the 4 domains and the power of his bloodline, although he was suppressed, he could contend with the Dao ancestor. On the other side, the Lord had been paying attention to the battlefield in the starry sky. Beside the Lord were Yan Yaoyao, Luo Ho and the others. Luo Ho looked at Yi Xian in the distance and said softly, "This person is truly a peerless genius. To actually resist a Dao ancestor for so long at the Dao corroboration realm." Qi Yaoyao spoke abruptly. "His body is strong. If his body wasn't strong enough, he would have perished a long time ago." Luo Ho was quite curious. What's his body? Why is it so strong? As he spoke, he gazed at Yan Yaoyao. Yan Yaoyao shook her head. "Don't look at me, I don't know either." She gazed at the Lord as she spoke. "The Lord is knowledgeable. Do you know what his body is?" The Lord shook his head. "I've never seen such a strong body. It can even resist the strength of a Dao attainment realm expert." Meanwhile, Luo Ho spoke abruptly. "Those 2 women can't resist the doubting Lord Mi." Yan Yaoyao gazed at Xianxia and Jiaolu. Even though they were strong, they were still being suppressed by Lord Mi. Yi Xian wasn't suppressing them either. If this continued, then Yi Xian's side would lose sooner or later. Meanwhile, Aku spoke abruptly. "Have all of you noticed? Yi Xian's aura is growing stronger and stronger." Everyone gazed at Yi Xian. Even though Yi Xian was being suppressed, his aura was growing stronger and stronger. The Lord suddenly smiled. "Interesting. This fellow might be breaking through during the battle." Yan Yaoyao spoke softly. "Will the Dao ancestor give him that chance?" The Lord shook his head. Once this fellow reaches the Dao attainment realm, it'll be impossible for the Dao ancestor to kill him alone. Even if he joins forces with Lord Mi, it'll be difficult to kill Yi Xian. Qi Yaoyao spoke. So they're going to use their trump card? The Lord nodded. They should be. Aku spoke abruptly. Lord, if we help Yi Xian now, wouldn't it be easy to destroy the doubting realm? The Lord smiled without a word. Yan Yaoyao spoke softly. If it's so easy to destroy the doubting realm, then you're underestimating the doubting realm. Aku frowned. Why? Do they have a stronger trump card? Yan Yaoyao looked at the Lord. The Lord smiled. You'll be shocked. Aku spoke in a low voice. Then why aren't they using the doubting realm? Qi Yaoyao replied. If I'm not wrong, they're saving it to deal with the people behind Yi Xian realm. Aku glanced around and spoke softly. Will the people behind Yi Xian realm appear? The Lord smiled. Who knows? At this moment, Yi Xian, who was not far away, suddenly forced the Tao ancestor back with a sword strike. Everyone looked at Yi Xian in the distance. Yi Xian stood there with his sword in hand, exuding a powerful aura. He was about to break through. Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath, the blood in his body surging. Powerful auras gushed out of his body, causing the entire starry sky to boil. Opposite Yi Xian, the Dao ancestor was expressionless. Want to break through? You're dreaming. As soon as he spoke, something appeared on the battlefield. The expressions of everyone in the fifth dimension changed drastically. Qi Yaoyao and the others also changed drastically. P.S. Everyone, please support the original version. One chapter costs 9 cents. I'll update 3 chapters a day, so it's only 10 cents. Thank you for your support. Thank you. Those who subscribe to the original version are the ones who feed us. Thank you for your support. Chapter 1407. The reason Qi Yaoyao and the others were shocked was because 2 figures had appeared behind Yi Xian. These 2 figures were actually at the Dao completion realm. Another 2 at the Dao completion realm. Doubting didn't only have 2 at the Dao completion realm but 4. When they saw this scene, many experts of the 5th dimension already felt despair. If there were only 2 at the Dao completion realm, then the 5th dimension could still fight them. But now there were 4. How could they fight? They couldn't fight at all. The 2 Dao completion realm experts charged at Yi Xian as soon as they appeared. Obviously, they didn't want to give Yi Xian any chance. This was normal because no one knew what would happen if Yi Xian reached the Dao resistance realm. The best way was to kill him before he broke through. Nearby, when they saw the 2 Dao attainment realm experts and the Dao ancestor charge towards Yi Xian, the expressions of Xianxia and the other women instantly changed, and they charged directly towards Yi Xian. However, it was utterly too late. Because the speed of the Dao ancestor and the 2 Dao attainment experts was simply too fast. The Lord and the others were also looking at Yi Xian. If the person behind Yi Xian didn't appear, then Yi Xian would basically be gone. Right at this moment, the 3 Dao ancestors who were charging at Yi Xian seemed to have noticed something. Their expressions changed drastically and they retreated like madmen. An ear-piercing sword howl suddenly resounded. The Lord's eyes narrowed. Not far away, over a dozen strands of sword qi were circling around Yi Xian. This wasn't Yi Xian's sword qi. It was the sword qi that Yi Xian had brought out of the dark realm. Who was the owner of this sword qi? It was Situ Tingyan. Besides the green-clothed man, she was the strongest in the sword Dao in the sword sect. Even though these strands of sword qi were ownerless, they were still very powerful. In the distance, the 3 Dao ancestors had extremely solemn expressions. It was especially so for the Dao ancestor. His expression was unprecedentedly solemn. He had seen such a powerful sword qi once before from Moon Yin, and now he saw it again. And this sword qi was clearly not Moon Yin's sword qi. In other words, behind Yi Xian, there was a powerful swordsman who was no weaker than Moon Yin. On the other side, Qin Yaoyao suddenly said, "The sword qi in the dark world vortex." Rahu nodded. I didn't expect him to be able to use this sword qi. This guy is too mysterious. The Lord looked at the sword qi and fell into deep thought. Not far away, Yi Xian closed his eyes. At this moment he felt that he had reached a critical point. The breakthrough was imminent. At that moment the nearby Dao ancestor suddenly said, "This sword qi has no owner." Ownerless sword qi. In other words, if the sword qi was destroyed there would be nothing left. The Dao ancestor was about to make a move when Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. How do you know it has no owner? The Dao ancestor stared at Yi Xian. If it has a owner, why don't you let the sword chi's owner come out? Yi Xian smiled. Dao ancestor, aren't you thinking too highly of yourself? Are you worthy of letting the sword chi's owner come out? The Dao ancestor was expressionless. Yi Xian, at this point, is there any use in using words? If you have someone, then call them out. Yi Xian laughed. Dao ancestor, are you afraid? The Dao ancestor looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak. At that moment, a Dao attainment expert suddenly said, he's stalling for time. Stalling for time. The Dao ancestor narrowed his eyes. At this moment, Yi Xian's aura was unprecedentedly powerful. He was about to break through. The Dao ancestor suddenly said, destroy the sword chi first. With that, he charged at Yi Xian. The other two Dao fulfillment experts also rushed over. Meanwhile, the sword chi around Yi Xian slashed out. Hiss. Over a dozen sword chi tore through the starry sky. It was extremely terrifying. It had to be said that the Dao ancestor and the other two Dao attainment experts were suppressed by the sword chi. Even the Dao ancestor and the other two Dao attainment experts didn't dare to go head-on against the sword chi. On the other side, the Lord said softly, a single sword chi that hasn't been destroyed for tens of thousands of years, and it's so powerful. It's ridiculously powerful. Luo Ho and the others didn't look too good. They were supposed to be the strongest experts in this world. But after seeing the sword chi, they suddenly realized that they were really weak. Not only was the sword chi indestructible for tens of thousands of years, but it was also so powerful. What they thought was the pinnacle was just a joke to some people. It was like that to Moon Yanyan, and it was the same to the sword chi's owner. In the distance, after the Dao ancestor and the other two Dao attainment experts were stalled by the sword chi, Yi Xian began to break through to the Dao attainment realm. He had to reach the Dao attainment realm. Once he did, his overall strength would undergo a qualitative transformation. At this moment, the Dao ancestor and the other two Dao attainment experts were burning with anxiety. If Yi Xian reached the Dao attainment realm, Yi Xian wouldn't be able to fight against the three of them alone. However, once he reached the Dao attainment realm, he would become an unknown variable. Who knew what would happen after he reached the Dao attainment realm? Not far away, the Dao ancestor and the other two Dao attainment experts began to use their full strength. Although the sword chi suppressed the three Dao ancestors, it was becoming more and more illusory. After all, it was ownerless sword chi that could be consumed and destroyed. On the other side, the battle between the experts of the fifth dimension and the experts of the Dao court was in full swing. The experts of the fifth dimension were at a slight disadvantage, but because of the 12 Naga dragon souls, the experts of the fifth dimension were only at a slight disadvantage. This was because the 12 Naga dragon souls were really too powerful. In order to deal with the 12 Naga dragon souls, the Daoting had mobilized a total of 26 divine sovereigns. Moreover, these 26 divine sovereigns were being suppressed by the 12 Naga dragon souls. In addition, Li Zua and the other two Dao ancestors were also extremely powerful. The three of them were forcefully holding back 11 divine sovereigns. It could be said that it would be difficult to determine the victor between the two sides in a short period of time. However, the situation was becoming more and more disadvantageous for Yi Xian's side. This was because two of Yi Xian's dozen sword chis had already disappeared. Although the sword chis were powerful, they were ownerless. If they were consumed too much, they would completely disappear. Now, the Dao ancestors and the other two Dao ancestors were madly consuming these sword chis. On the other side, Luo Ho said softly, he's about to break through. Just as he finished speaking, boom. In the distance, a powerful aura suddenly erupted from Yi Xian's body. Wherever this aura passed, the surrounding starry sky trembled. Dao attainment realm. Seeing that Yi Xian was breaking through, Luo Ho shook his head. This guy breaks through like eating. It's really infuriating to compare oneself with others. The Lord smiled. He risked his life. Qi Yaoyao suddenly said, does the Daoting still have a trump card? The Lord looked at Qi Yaoyao and smiled. You want to help? Qi Yaoyao said softly, why not? The Lord smiled. If we help Yi Xian, even if the Daoting has a trump card, we can still destroy the Daoting. Of course, we will just have to pay a price. Qi Yaoyao looked at the Lord. Does the Lord not choose to help because you have other concerns? The Lord looked at the faraway Yi Xian and said softly, he is a whirlpool. If we get too involved, it will be difficult for us to escape in the future. Qi Yaoyao was silent. She knew that the Lord was talking about the reason for Yi Xian's misfortune. The Lord was worried about this. At this moment the Lord suddenly smiled. Let's wait and see. In the distance, after Yi Xian broke through, he waved his right hand and the 10 sword energies suddenly flew back in front of him. Seeing this, the Dao ancestor and the others' expressions became even uglier. It wasn't because of Yi Xian's breakthrough, but because Yi Xian could control the 10 sword energies. After all, these 10 sword energies weren't Yi Xian's own sword energies. Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath. Dao Defense Realm. After reaching the Dao Defense Realm, he felt that everything was different. His divine soul, divine sense, strength, and his own body, everything had undergone earth-shattering changes. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly looked at the Dao ancestor. The next moment he appeared in front of the Dao ancestor and slashed down with his sword. Dao sword. And 4 more domains. The Dao ancestor narrowed his eyes, took a step forward and pointed out with a finger. Pedon. At this moment Yi Xian's sword fell. Boom. Under the gazes of everyone. The Dao ancestor was instantly pushed over 1 kilometer back, and his right index finger had been severed by Yi Xian's attack. Besides that, his right arm had split open and blood sprayed from it. The expressions of everyone here became solemn when they witnessed this scene. The Lord frowned slightly as well. Isn't Yi Xian's strength a little too exaggerated after he attained the Dao defense realm? He'd injured a Dao ancestor with a single strike of his sword. Meanwhile, Yan Yaoyao suddenly said, "It's his body." The Lord gazed at Yi Xian and spoke softly, "What formidable physical strength. What cultivation technique does he cultivate? His body is actually so strong." Yi Xian's combat strength had risen by so much mainly because of his physical body. Dao defense. Now Yi Xian hadn't just attained the Dao defense realm in terms of physical body, his cultivation had as well. It wasn't as simple as 1 + 1. The Dao ancestor stared fixedly at Yi Xian from afar, and he was extremely shocked. How could Yi Xian's combat strength be so great after attaining the Dao defense realm? The Dao ancestor restrained his thoughts and glanced at the 2 others. "Let's attack together." As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward. The other 2 experts at the Dao formation realm attacked as well. 3 experts at the Dao formation realm attacked together. Yi Xian took a step forward and slashed with his sword. Bang! His attack blasted the Dao ancestor back, but it only took a moment for 2 fists to smash against Yi Xian's chest and head. Bang! Yi Xian's figure was instantly blasted flying, and he flew for over 3 kilometers. After he stopped moving, Yi Xian felt dizzy. Meanwhile, the 2 Dao formation realm experts appeared in front of him again. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly, and he swung his sword horizontally. Bang! An expanse of sword light exploded apart, and then Yi Xian was blasted flying again. Meanwhile, the Dao ancestor suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and he suddenly swung his fist at Yi Xian. Bang! The starry sky trembled as his fist smashed forward. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and then Situ Tingyun's 10 strands of sword energy suddenly slashed forward. The Dao ancestor's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he immediately retreated explosively. The other 2 Dao formation realm experts hurriedly retreated as well. Situ Tingyun's sword energy was capable of killing them. Yi Xian wiped off the blood on the corners of his mouth with a solemn expression on his face. Even though he'd attained the Dao defense realm, he was still unable to fight 3 enemies by himself. Should I activate the energy of my bloodline? Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. The energy of his bloodline had gone completely berserk, and it was his final trump card. The Dao ancestor stared fixedly at Yi Xian from afar, and he was even more shocked by Yi Xian's physical body. Yi Xian had just suffered the full forced attacks of 2 Dao formation realm experts, yet he was still alive and well. What sort of physical body is this? Meanwhile, one of the Dao formation realm experts by the Dao ancestor's side spoke abruptly, "We can't delay any longer. If we continue to delay, then both our forces and the 5th dimension will suffer heavy losses. Moreover, I'm afraid an unexpected event might occur." The Dao ancestor turned around to look. At this moment, the experts of the 5th dimension were locked in battle with the experts of the Doubting realm. If this continued, then both sides would suffer heavy losses. After all, the Doubting realm had another enemy, and it was the Dao tomb. As for the 3 of them, although they could defeat Yi Xian had the sword qi and Yi Xian's powerful physical body, so they wouldn't be able to kill Yi Xian in a short period of time. Thinking to this point, the Dao ancestor looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, I originally prepared a big gift for the woman behind you, but since she won't appear, then I'll give it to you. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and the next moment, a golden light soared into the sky from the 34th layer of the doubting realm. In the blink of an eye, this golden light appeared in the starry sky of the 5th dimension. In an instant, the entire starry sky trembled. Inside that golden light was a god's seal. Inside that god's seal, an illusory figure gradually condensed. As this illusory figure condensed, a formless pressure enveloped the entire 5th dimension. Under this pressure, everyone felt like they were suffocating. Even Yi Xian felt a tightness in his chest at this moment, as if there were several mountains pressing down on him. On the other side, the Lord's expression also became incomparably solemn. The head of the 3,000 Great Daoists. Chapter 1408. 3,000 Great Daoists. The 3,000 Great Daoists represented 3,000 different Great Daoists. Of course, there were far more than 3,000 Great Daoists in the world. And among these Great Daoists there were strong and weak ones. The first was the Great Dao of Destiny. The foremost of the 3,000 Great Daoists. The Dao ancestor didn't control the Great Dao of Destiny. However, someone in the doubting had once controlled the Great Dao, and that person was the founder of the doubting. Doubting's strongest trump card was not the 2 hidden Dao realm powerhouses, but the God's Seal. That was because the doubting ancestral souls were inside. This was doubting's last resort. Originally, he was saving it for the mysterious woman in a plain dress behind Yi Xian. However, the woman in a plain dress didn't show herself. For the sake of swiftly killing Yi Xian, he could only utilize this trump card first. In the distance, Yi Xian stared at the silhouette within the God's Seal. Although his countenance was calm, his heart was thundering with rage. Damn it, he's summoning the ancestor again? At this moment, everyone stopped what they were doing. There was no need to fight. If Yi Xian's side didn't have a heavyweight expert, then it would be over. It didn't take long for a woman to appear within the seal. The woman was dressed in a long black robe. Her features were picturesque and she held a black folding fan in her hand. After the woman appeared, she looked around and looked at the Dao ancestor. However, as if she had discovered something, she suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian below. Seeing this scene, the Dao ancestor's expression suddenly changed. My ancestor knows this Yi Xian? Yi Xian was slightly stunned. This doubting ancestor knew him? In the air, the woman looked at Yi Xian. Dao form. Dao body. Upon hearing this, Yi Xian's expression instantly changed. Damn it, this woman doesn't recognize me, but she recognizes my Taoist form. The woman suddenly smiled and said, Interesting, I didn't expect someone to have cultivated a Dao body. How interesting. On the other side, the Dao ancestor bowed slightly to the woman. Ancestor, what is this Dao body? The woman glanced at the Dao ancestor. Did you summon me? The Dao ancestor quickly nodded. The woman turned to look at Yi Xian. She gently tapped the folding fan in her right hand on the palm of her left hand and said with a smile, You are also a protector. Yi Xian said nothing. The Dao ancestor's expression changed drastically. Just as he was about to speak, the woman suddenly said, To be able to cultivate a Dao body and possess a disaster cause. Young man, you are not simple at all. Yi Xian hurriedly said, To tell you the truth, I am the young sect master of Whirling Sect. The woman blinked. Whirling Sect. Are you sure? Yi Xian said seriously, Of course. The woman smiled and said, It just so happens that I am acquainted with the Whirling Sect's sect leader. Let me ask him. As she spoke, she turned her head and kissed him. Below Yi Xian. After a while, the woman turned her head and looked at Yi Xian. The Whirling Sect's sect master said that there's no such person as you. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Why don't we change the topic? The woman was stunned and then she cracked a smile. It was like 100 flowers blooming, causing the starry sky to pale in comparison. At the side, the Dao ancestor said in a low voice, Ancestor, this person is a great enemy of my doubting. The woman looked at the Dao ancestor. Don't speak for now. The Dao ancestor. The woman turned to look at Yi Xian and said with a smile, Not only did you cultivate a Dao body, you were also able to live until now despite having a disaster cause. The most important thing is the power of your bloodline. Your bloodline is the strongest power I have ever seen. Yi Xian hurriedly took out the sword spirit and the sword at the top of the pagoda. Senior, why don't you take a look at this? The woman glanced at the two swords and said with a smile, Are you threatening me? Yi Xian shook his head. Senior, not only do you doubting want to destroy me, but you also want to destroy my five-dimensional universe. Now you have even invited you out. Tell me who is threatening who? The woman turned to look at the Dao ancestor. You want to destroy this universe? The Dao ancestor's expression was somewhat ugly. The woman asked with a smile, As the guardian of the great Dao, shouldn't you be maintaining the balance and peace of the universe? The Dao ancestor's expression became even uglier. The woman looked at the Dao ancestor and the others below and said with a smile, It seems that you have turned the 3,000 great Dao into your personal tools. Hearing this, the expressions of all the doubting powerhouses below became extremely ugly. What a heart-wrenching remark. The woman looked at Dao Ting and the others. The great Dao once chose all of you. It's obvious that all of you are outstanding in some way. However, from the looks of it now, all of you are still going with the flow and have forgotten your original intentions. The Dao ancestor suddenly said, Ancestor, this Yi Xian is a great enemy of the doubting. This person once swore to destroy the doubting. The woman looked at the Dao ancestor and said with a smile, Can you tell me why he did this? The Dao ancestor was speechless. The woman said again, Everything has a reason. Why did he want to destroy the doubting? Can you tell me? The Dao ancestor was speechless. At this time Yi Xian suddenly said, Why don't I tell you? The woman looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, That's fine too. Yi Xian nodded. He told the whole story of the grudge between him and the doubting without adding any details. The atmosphere in the surroundings had become slightly strange. This woman was originally called out by the doubting to deal with Yi Xian. But now this woman was listening to Yi Xian talk about the doubting. Whose ancestor was this? The Dao ancestor's face was gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. On the other side, Rahu looked at the Great Lord. Great Lord, the Great Lord said softly, the Dao ancestor has miscalculated. Back then, the great Dao guardians of that generation were all impartial. Those people were righteous and paid attention to fairness in everything. Because of this, there were all kinds of orders in that era. As he said that, he looked at the Dao ancestor. He thought that the doubting ancestor would help him, but that's not the case. The doubting ancestor paid more attention to right and wrong. And this matter is obviously the doubting is not in the right. So, there's going to be a good show. At this time Yi Xian stopped in the distance. The woman turned to look at the Dao ancestor. Did this little friend Yi slander the doubting? The Dao ancestor did not say anything. The woman suddenly waved her right hand. Smack. Under everyone's shocked gazes, the Dao ancestor was sent flying with a slap. He flew more than 10,000 feet, and when he came to a stop, his fleshly body became illusory. He shattered his body with a slap. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed. Yi Xian's expression also changed. Damn, how could this woman be so strong? If he were to be slapped, wouldn't his Daoist physique be destroyed? The woman turned to look at Yi Xian and said with a smile, This matter is the doubting's fault. On behalf of the doubting, I apologize to you and the entire fifth dimension. Everyone, Yi Xian was also dumbfounded. The enemy's biggest boss apologized to him? What was going on? Yi Xian hesitated for a while and then said, Why, shouldn't you be helping the doubting? The woman shook her head. Logically, I should be helping the doubting. But the doubting is not in the right. Yi Xian looked at the woman. You're being reasonable? The woman said with a smile, Why not? The 3,000 great Daos are a kind of order. As the guardian of the order, if you are unreasonable, who will obey the order? Yi Xian shook his head. In today's world, only fists matter, not reason. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Then, are you interested in rebuilding the order? Yi Xian looked at the woman. Do you want me to be the doubting master? The woman said with a smile, Can't I? Yi Xian shook his head. Senior, my mind is in a mess right now. The boss of the doubting master actually wanted him to be the doubting master. What was going on? The woman said with a smile, Do you have 5 Daoist scriptures on you? Yi Xian nodded. The woman said again, There should be 2 doubting masters. With these 2 you have 7. At this moment the Lord suddenly said with a smile, I Dao Tomb also has 1. With this one young master Yi has 8. The woman looked at the Lord. The Lord bowed slightly. Greetings, ancestor. The woman said with a smile, "You used to be a doubting master?" The Lord nodded. "Yes. However, I rebelled later on. Because doubting is not the doubting I once thought of. Of course, this has nothing to do with ancestor. I admire what ancestor did just now." The woman smiled and looked at Xian. "As long as you nod, you can have 8 Daoist scriptures. So what do you think?" Xian looked at the woman. "Why did you choose me?" The woman blinked and said playfully, "Do you want to hear the truth or a lie?" Xian thought for a while and said, "Lie first." The woman said with a smile, "You are a rare genius. With you we can revitalize doubting and rebuild order." Xian smiled. "What about the truth?" The woman looked at Xian. "You have many backers." Xian was speechless. The woman said again, "It is not particularly difficult to revitalize doubting. However, it is very difficult to gather all the Daoist scriptures and summon the great Dao spirit. To restore the 3,000 great Dao and rebuild order, we must gather all the Daoist scriptures and summon the great Dao spirit. However, ordinary people cannot do this." Xian was puzzled. "Why is it so difficult?" The woman said with a smile, "There are 3 difficulties. First, the last Daoist scripture is in Whirling World. That place is not something you can provoke now. Second, many people will not let you gather all the Daoist scriptures. For example, Whirling World, Dark Abyss and Ancient God Abyss. If these forces know that you have 8 Daoist scriptures, they will be jealous. Once they are jealous, you will be in danger. Third, even if you gather all 8 Daoist scriptures, the great Dao spirit may not recognize you. Might even kill you." Xian was puzzled. "Why would it kill me?" The woman shook her head. "You will know this in the future. I can only tell you that it is very difficult to gather all the Daoist scriptures and get the great Dao spirit's recognition." Xian said in a deep voice, "Senior, do you think I can get the great Dao spirit's recognition?" The woman blinked. "I don't know if she will recognize you. However, I know that she will not dare to kill you." Xian frowned. "Why?" The woman said, "Because you have many backers." Xian was speechless. "P.S. Don't say that I am threatening you. If you don't give me the ticket, I will castrate myself." Chapter 1409. Many backers. Xian was speechless. What was she talking about? In the starry sky, the woman smiled and said, "What if I don't agree?" Xian looked at the woman and said, "What if I don't agree?" The woman blinked her eyes and said, "You will agree." Xian smiled and said, "Why?" The woman said, "Because you have no reason to refuse." Xian shook his head and said, "I only want to protect the 5-dimensional universe." The woman smiled and said, "If you want to protect the universe behind you, then become the doubting master and you will be able to protect it better." Xian pointed at the doubting experts in the distance and said, "They will not accept me." The woman pointed at herself and said, "I approve of you." Xian smiled and said, "Then can you make them approve of me?" The woman asked, "If I approve of you, will they dare to not approve of you?" Xian was silent. The woman said again, "Young man, I don't have much time left." Xian looked at the woman and she continued, "While I am still here, I can help you. Therefore you must make a decision." Xian was silent. The woman smiled and said, "I still have about a quarter of an hour. Want to walk with me?" Xian thought about it and said, "Okay." The woman and Xian walked towards the starry sky in the distance. In the field, the doubting experts looked at each other in dismay. The Dao ancestor who only had his soul left had a gloomy expression and no one knew what he was thinking. In the distant starry sky, the woman pointed and said, "In the distant starry sky, there is a mysterious force called the Ancient God Abyss. The weakest in this force is the Dao attainment realm and there are experts above the Dao attainment realm." Xian said in a deep voice, "Are they outside the Dao scripture?" The woman shook her head and said, "They are within the Dao scripture." Xian frowned and said, "Experts above the Dao attainment realm are also within the Dao scripture?" The woman nodded and said, "Yes." Xian was silent. He had underestimated this Dao scripture. The woman continued, "This power has been fighting against a mysterious power all year round. This mysterious power is called Dark Abyss. This place is very terrifying because a monstrous genius once appeared in this place. This person is called Second Brother Dao. Back then he created a dark scripture based on the Dao scripture." Xian frowned. "Secret scripture?" The woman nodded. "It was created according to the Dao scripture. The people of the dark world all cultivate the dark scripture. As far as I know, they have two goals. First, they want to destroy the Dao scripture martial arts civilization and make the dark scripture martial arts civilization the only one. Second, they want to destroy the great Dao spirit. As she spoke, she looked at Xianxia. Do you know why the Dao scripture is divided into 9 parts? Xian shook his head. The woman replied, because the Dao scripture was destroyed by the people of the dark abyss. Xian was speechless. The woman suddenly asked, are you willing to give up on the Dao scriptures? Xian was silent. The woman smiled and said, looks like you are not willing to give up. Actually, if I were you, I wouldn't give up either. Why? Because even if you give up, they might not let you go. In this world, being weak is a mistake and a sin. Xian gave a thumbs up. Senior's words are brilliant. The woman laughed and gently fanned Xian's head. Don't play tricks. I told you so much because I want to tell you that you will always be the Dao scripture. One day you will face the dark abyss. If you become the lord of the doubting, the forces you control will become even stronger. After all, the doubting's overall forces are still very strong, right? It's very strong, right? Xian was silent. The woman continued. Moreover, if you become the lord of the doubting, you will immediately have 2 Dao scriptures. Apart from that, I can give you a surprise. Xian was curious. Surprise. The woman smiled and said, it is in the 34th heaven of the doubting. Xian looked at the woman. Senior, you really want me to become the lord of the doubting? Why is that? The woman smiled and did not say anything. Xian said, Senior, can you tell me the truth? The woman nodded and looked at Xian. There is a bad karma between you and the doubting. I want to turn this bad karma into good karma. Of course, I feel that you are also the hope to save the doubting. After all, the doubting now is not the doubting of the past. However, I feel that even if you cannot restore order to this world, you should be able to make the doubting better. Xian looked at the woman and did not say anything. The woman smiled and said, otherwise, what do you think I am scheming? Xian shook his head. I don't know. The woman continued to walk forward. My generation has sacrificed too much for the order of this world. I don't want to see the doubting continue to decline, and I don't want to see the doubting perish. Xian asked, Senior, have you fallen? The woman smiled and did not say anything. Xian asked again, no? The woman smiled and said, you care a lot about me? Xian was speechless. The woman stopped and looked at Xian. How is it? Have you thought it through? Xian was silent. At this moment the woman suddenly said, Nian Nian. Xian looked at the woman. The woman smiled and said, that 5th dimension Tendo is still alive, right? Xian said in a deep voice, what do you mean, Senior? The woman looked at Xian. Do you really think that her death was because of my doubting? Xian clenched his fists. What do you mean, Senior? The woman smiled and said, she did not die because of doubting. She died because of you. Xian stared at the woman. Why do you say that? The woman pointed at Xian. The cause of calamity. She has helped you too much. Not only did she help you too much, but she also forcefully interfered with your cause of calamity, helping you block some of the calamity karma that originally belonged to you. In short, you just need to understand one thing. The cause of calamity on you is not as simple as you think. You want to protect the entire 5th dimension, so your cause of calamity is very likely to implicate the entire 5th dimension. Xian said, then Senior, aren't you afraid that I will implicate doubting? The woman smiled and said, there are no absolutes in everything. You can cause the 5th dimension and doubting to perish together, but you can also cause the 5th dimension and doubting to become even more powerful. Xian was silent. The woman opened her palm and a god's seal appeared in her hand. She handed the god's seal to Xian. This is the first of the 3,000 Grand Daos, the Grand Dao of Destiny. It will fuse with you, allowing you to slowly comprehend the Dao of Destiny. You will also be able to use it to achieve Dao in a short period of time. Dao Realm. Xian was silent. The woman continued, if you want to protect the 5th dimension and protect your sister Nian, you will need to obtain even more power. Xian softly said, it seems that I am being unreasonable. As he spoke, he received the god's seal. The woman smiled and said, it is not unreasonable, but you are very cautious. If I am not wrong, you should be afraid that I will plot against you. I can also tell you that I am indeed plotting against you. Xian looked at the woman and said, Senior, will we meet in the future? The woman smiled and said, it is up to you. At this moment Yi Xian knew that the woman in front of him was not dead. The woman continued, "Let me tell you a piece of bad news. The whirling world should already know that you have the 5 Tao scriptures." Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he asked, "Why?" The woman looked at Yi Xian and smiled and said, "Because I have communicated with the whirling world before. With the strength of the whirling world, they should be able to sense the aura of the 5 Tao scriptures. After all, you were so close to me at that time." "Yi Xian," the woman smiled and said, "This is the price you have to pay for deceiving me. Lying has a price." Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. The woman glanced at her body. At this moment her body was quickly becoming illusory. The woman smiled and said, "It is going to disappear. Do you have any questions? If there is, I will answer them if I can." Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, "Where is Senior now?" The woman shook her head, "I can't answer." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Why?" The woman smiled and said, "There is no why, I just can't answer. You can ask the next question. Of course you can also choose not to ask." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "How should I address you, Senior?" The woman looked at Yi Xian and smiled meaningfully. "What do you want to do?" Yi Xian hurriedly said, "I don't mean anything else. I just want to ask. You can't answer this?" The woman laughed and said, "There is no harm in telling you. My name is Zhao Jiqing. Most people call me Qingzhu. In fact, very few people know my real name." "Zhao Jiqing." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "I will remember it." The woman looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "I have 2 bad news. Do you want to hear it?" "Bad news?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. "What bad news?" The woman said, "The first bad news is that the Daoist ancestor ran away." Yi Xian frowned slightly. The woman said softly, "The second bad news is that someone helped him escape. And this person should be someone from the dark world. Of course there is even worse news. The 2 Taoist scriptures were taken away by the Daoist ancestor." Yi Xian immediately jumped up. "Senior, why didn't you stop them?" The woman was a little helpless. "I talked too much with you." "Yi Xian." The woman smiled and said, "Don't be angry. What is yours is still yours. What is not yours you can't take it away." After saying that, her lower body disappeared. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Senior, can I call the ancestor in the future? Can I summon you to help me?" The woman blinked her eyes. "I'm afraid not." Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "Why?" The woman smiled and said, "Do you want to hear the truth or a lie?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "What is the lie?" The woman said seriously, "The lie is that this is the last clone I left here. But now this clone will disappear completely. So, you know." Yi Xian was a little curious. "What is the truth?" The woman looked at Yi Xian and grinned. "The truth is that I don't want to have too much contact with you. I am afraid of bad luck. So I refuse your summoning. Bye-bye." After saying that, she disappeared. In the air, Yi Xian was petrified. Chapter 14:10. In the starry sky, Yi Xian stood quietly, deep in thought. It was very dramatic. He did not expect that he would become the Lord of Doubting. At this time, the Lord and the others suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. The Lord smiled. "Do you feel like it's a dream?" Yi Xian nodded. "A little." The Lord laughed. "I also feel like it's a dream." Just a moment ago, Yi Xian and Doubting were mortal enemies. Now Yi Xian had become the Lord of Doubting. This Dao ancestor's summoning directly killed himself and gave Doubting to Yi Xian. This operation was really rare. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior, is there a big difference between the Doubting of the past and the Doubting of the present?" The Lord smiled. "There is no comparison at all. The great Tao was once complete and there was order in the world. Good will be rewarded and evil will be punished. The reason why it could be like this was because the great Tao guardians of Doubting were impartial and impartial. At that time, no one dared to practice favoritism because if they did, not only would they be deprived of their deity position, but they would also fall into the evil path of reincarnation. In that era, the price of doing evil was very high. Therefore, the great Tao guardians basically did not dare to do evil." Yi Xian frowned. "Then why did Doubting become like this?" The Lord said, "Because Qingzhu and the others disappeared." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Disappeared? Left?" The Lord said softly, "They should have left. Anyway, after that group of people left, the people behind them began to take over Doubting. Unknowingly, Doubting began to slowly deteriorate. Originally, the Dao master position of doubting was for the virtuous, but later on this position became the private property of some people. They only passed it on to their own sons and it was passed down from generation to generation, including the Dao ancestor just now. The reason why he could become the Lord of Doubting was because his father was the previous Dao ancestor. Xian was silent. The Lord laughed. Now that you are the Lord of Doubting, you can change doubting. Also be careful of the Dao ancestor. He should have been rescued by the people from the dark abyss. An abyss. Xian said solemnly. The people from the dark abyss saved him because of the 2 scriptures, right? The Lord nodded. Yes. After that, In Yuan will probably come looking for you. Xian was speechless. The Lord flicked his finger and a Daoist scripture appeared in front of Xian. It was the 6th scripture. The Lord smiled and said, I'll give it to you. If you have time, come to the Dao tomb to play. With that he turned around and left. Xian looked at the scripture in his hands, speechless. The Lord was definitely afraid that the people from the dark abyss would come looking for him. That was why he gave the Dao scripture to him so easily. An abyss. Xian was silent for a moment before he turned around and left. Somewhere in the starry sky, Suke looked away after Xian left. In fact, he had come to the 5th dimension a long time ago. However, he did not make a move. He wanted to act at the crucial moment. He did not expect that after the doubting ancestor came out, the doubting ancestor would stand on Xian's side. He did not expect this at all. Of course, he did not expect that In Yuan would save the Dao ancestor. This meant that In Yuan would become enemies with Xian. Thinking of this, Suke wanted to laugh. Suke suddenly said, Stay here and protect young Master Yi. I will return to the ancient god abyss. With that he turned around and left. On the other side, the Dao ancestor, who was already a soul body, stood in the starry sky. Not far in front of him stood a middle-aged man in a black robe. The Dao ancestor looked at the middle-aged man in front of him. In Yuan. The middle-aged man smiled. You guessed it right. You can call me Lianzun. The Dao ancestor was expressionless. You saved me for the 2 scriptures? Lianzun smiled. Will you give them to me? The Dao ancestor laughed at himself. Can I refuse? With that he flicked his finger and 2 scriptures appeared in front of Lianzun. Lianzun did not refuse and kept the 2 scriptures. At this moment the Dao ancestor suddenly said, Xian has 5 of them. Lianzun glanced at the Dao ancestor and smiled. You want us to kill Xian? The Dao ancestor smiled. You wanted to go, didn't you? Lianzun looked at the starry sky and said softly, To be honest, we are here for Xian. As far as we know, he is related to the Sword Sect and the Sword Sect has a blood feud with In Yuan. The Dao ancestor frowned. Blood feud. Lianzun said softly, Back then the Sword Sect's ancestral master, that female sword cultivator, not only killed dozens of our Dark Abyss experts, but she also brought her sword to our Dark Abyss. At this point he didn't say anything else. That incident back then could be said to be the Dark Abyss humiliation. The Dao ancestor looked at Lianzun. I have to remind you that there is a little girl by Xian's side. Her name is Moon Yanyan. Her strength is beyond your imagination. If you want to obtain the scriptures and kill Xian, you must be quick. Otherwise, once she regains her memory and strength, you will be like ants before her. Lianzun said softly, Are you talking about the Moon Yanyan who shattered your body with less than 30% of her strength? The Dao ancestor said, Yes. Lianzun was silent. Coming to this place this time, many things and people were beyond his expectations. Especially Xian. Xian's strength shocked him. Although he was at the Dao controlling realm, Xian could totally become a Dao realm expert. Most importantly, Xian's bloodline power and body were too terrifying. The Dao ancestor was about to speak, but Lianzun smiled and said, You don't have to sow discord. We will kill Xian because he is not only related to the Sword Sect, but also to the ancient god Abyss. Therefore he must die. He shook his head and smiled. To be honest, there are too many reasons to kill him. The Dao ancestor slowly closed his eyes. At this moment he was the most indignant and aggrieved. He had been holding back his ultimate move, but he did not expect that it would not only destroy him but also help Xian. Of course he did not expect that the ancestor of doubting would not help doubting but Xian. And he even made Xian the master of doubting. Every time he thought of this his liver ached. Angry. At this moment Lien Zun suddenly said, Dao Ancestor, are you willing to go to the Dark Abyss? If you are, we will help you to restore your body. The Dao Ancestor said softly, do I have the right to refuse? Lien Zun laughed. Then we will be on the same side from now on. Let's go. After saying this he turned and left. The Dao Ancestor turned and looked at the starry sky of the fifth dimension. His eyes gradually turned cold. Yixian, we will meet again. After saying this he turned and left. Yixian returned to the starry sky of the fifth dimension. At this moment some of the people of Doubting had left. Bai Dizzy had also disappeared, but White Robe was still there. Yixian walked in front of the doubting experts. Everyone was looking at Yixian. In fact, at this moment they were already confused. They were originally enemies with Yixian, but with the appearance of their ancestor, everything changed. The ancestor approved of Yixian. Could it be that they wanted to become enemies with the ancestor? At this moment White Robe suddenly walked in front of Yixian. He looked at Yixian without saying a word. Yixian suddenly smiled. If you want to stay you can stay. If you don't want to you can leave immediately. None of the doubting experts moved. Where could they go? At this moment Yixian opened his palm. A god seal appeared in his hand. The great Tao of Destiny. The expressions of the three Tao completion realm experts instantly became extremely complicated when they witnessed this scene. Their ancestor had passed this great Tao seal to Yixian. At this moment Venerable Me suddenly said, Your Excellency, did the ancestor say anything? Yixian looked at Venerable Me. She said that I should go find her in the future. Venerable Me was stunned, then bowed slightly. This old man is willing to serve Your Excellency as my master. The other two doubting experts bowed slightly as well. When they saw the three doubting experts bow, some of the doubting experts who were watching hurriedly bowed as well. The strongest three had already expressed their allegiance, so they naturally wouldn't hesitate any longer. Yixian slowly closed his eyes. It's time for the doubting to change. Venerable Me hesitated for a moment and said, I'm afraid it'll be difficult. Yixian gazed at Venerable Me. Do you want to change? Venerable Me replied, Rome wasn't built in a single day. Yixian smiled. Do you know why Big Sister Qing is so strong? Venerable Me was stunned. Big Sister Qing? Yixian's expression didn't change. Yes. She asked me to call her Big Sister and she said that she'll protect me from now on. Is there a problem? Venerable Me replied, I have no problem. Yixian glanced at the doubting experts. Finally he looked at White Robe. White Robe, do you think the doubting should change? White Robe looked at Yixian. You want me to submit? Yixian smiled. I don't want you to submit. However, I want to say that you don't have to fight for me. You can continue to fight for the doubting. White Robe was silent. Yixian asked. Make your own decision. White Robe looked at Yixian. Bai Dizzy asked me to follow you. Bai Dizzy. Yixian frowned slightly. He looked around. Where is he? White Robe said indifferently. He knows that you'll kill him, so he ran. Yixian was silent. He really wanted to kill Bai Dizzy. It was this person who had targeted him time and time again. White Robe continued. He said that the ancestor chose you for 3 reasons. First, the ancestor saw the strength of the person behind you. The strength of the person behind you is definitely beyond our imagination. Second, the ancestor wanted to end the bad karma between you and the doubting, and turn this bad karma into good karma. Third, the ancestor chose you because she wanted you to change the doubting and rebuild